Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. From where I am currently in Daegu, South Korea, to wherever you are in the world, welcome to this week's edition of my Creative Contessa Medieval Sewing Party. And today I've got lots of exciting things planned for us. I'd like to thank you all for joining. Let us start off with the traditional and now almost overplayed. Let me know if you can hear me, please, and how the quality of the sound is. I'm just using the camera's internal microphone because unfortunately the only other microphones I have plug into my phone via the C jack, and that is currently occupied by an Ethernet cable. So welcome everyone. We will get started with the traditional getting dressed. I'm starting off, we're going Franco-Burgundian, Anglo-Franco-Burgundian today, as basically this is the same way that people dressed in England and France and Burgundy, Flanders and whatnot in this era. And so I am starting off already pre-attired in my smokka, as it would be called in 15th century English. And this is of geometric construction. Some of you are asking me about this garment, and so I thought there's a hole that needs to be repaired. Oh well, not today. We're asking me about the construction of this garment and the shaping. The shaping is documentable to, if you look at imagery from the 15th century, France, Burgundy, England, the rare images you have of women in their smocks, there are not many, but the few that we have, if you look at them, the smocks are not shapeless turnip sacks. The smocks actually follow the lines of their body. Now, yes, that could absolutely be an artist's convention, but I doubt it, because in the 15th century, 14th and 15th century, the base layer gown that goes over top of your smock is super fitted. And if you have a turnip sack under a super fitted gown, it's not really comfortable. There's a lot of extra bunching at the waist. So I'm pretty certain that the shaping of the smock is not an artist convention. It's intentional. We have no extant ones from this era in the entirety. So this is all conjectural, but based on the visual evidence. And this is achieved, in my case, I achieved this by using long triangular side gores. So you can see from my armpit down to my waist and a little bit past my waist to create a little more ease because I made some mistakes on this one. Anyway, long triangular side gores that create that. And the side gores are also what create a sort of squared off rounded arm's eye. So it comes down from the shoulders, and then the triangles actually create a kind of squared off round arm's eye. So it's a square arm's eye, not just straight down. And this actually gives me good range of motion. You can see that the smock is not actually being moved by my arm when I lift it up, right? And so that means that when I put my fitted kirtle on, it will also not bind me. I will not be bound, because you'll notice there's also not a lot of bulk here. So these long triangles, these long gussets that I've used, they actually allow me range of motion. They create the fitting, and they make it so that I don't have a big bulky amount of fabric here in my armpit, but can still move my arms just fine. So those are the reasons behind these specific choices that I made for these gussets. Susan, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. I am wonderful, and the kitties are all very upset with me because I banished them from my bedchamber. I do not sleep at night if I let them into the room, because they use my body as a parkour and horse. So yeah, they're not so happy with me these days, but that's okay. They're spoiled little brats, so they're fine. In the back, I have a gore in the center in the skirts, and on the sides, both sides, there are gores to create width, and in the front as well. And this is based on sort of fragmentary evidence that we have of some extant smocks, chemises, camise, sort of across Europe, because no extant ones in this style in their entirety have survived. Linen does not generally survive in the archaeological record, unfortunately. Plant fiber, cellulose in general, tends to rot. It's very rare that it survives. When it survives in the archaeological record, it's usually because there's some kind of metal piece that's actually protecting it from the corrosive effects of soil and water and oxygen and all of that. Those sorts of things that generally corrupt fabric, cellulose especially. So that's why we don't have many linen undergarments from the Middle Ages. We have also the linen that they basically recycled until, first it would be a smock, then it would get cut down for a smaller one once this started wearing away. Then it would be turned into maybe pouches for seals. And then when that failed, it could be turned into rags for washing things. And then when the rag failed, it was recycled into rag paper. Yes, paper. They had paper especially in the second half of the Middle Ages, definitely had paper. They had paper production facilities and there were paper mills. And paper in the Middle Ages was made from linen. It's made from plant fibers. So that's why we don't really have many linen garments that have survived from the Middle Ages, because they've either rotted away when they did happen to end up in the ground, or they were just upcycled until they became paper. So you can thank all of those books from the 15th and 16th century that are either illuminated or printed on paper. That's why we have no linen undergarments from the Middle Ages. So literacy for the win. Takeda, thank you for joining us. So lovely to see you this evening. Morning, evening for you, of course. Okay, any questions about the smock? Just let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next layer. Someone asked me about silk smocks. I have zero evidence of a silk smock from before the 16th century. In the 16th century, you start seeing silk crop up in extremely wealthy inventories, or the inventories of extremely wealthy individuals and expense accounts. But before the 16th century, I have not personally found primary source evidence of silk undergarments from Burgundy, France, England. I haven't even found myself any evidence of silk camice from the Italies in the 15th century. I can't prove a negative. I just personally haven't seen the proof of it. If you have found evidence, primary source evidence of silk being used for this underlayer before the 16th century, so before 1500, do let me know, because that would be really fascinating. Cotton also was not being woven into the kind of cotton you think of. Cotton in Europe in this era was either imported from India. India, by the way, is this massive India that medieval people thought was India, which is way bigger than modern day India. But from that part of the world, right? That's where cotton came from. And it was generally imported by bales as cotton wool. And then it was usually, if it was spun into a mixed linen, a compound fabric of fustian, which was a linen cotton blend. But otherwise, we have like almost no evidence of linen. I haven't seen evidence of linen as a pure standalone fabric being used in clothing before 1500. I've only seen evidence for linen cotton blends. And from what I understand, a pure linen, especially if it were bakaram, which was this really super fine lawn-like linen that was imported from India, that would have been so insanely expensive that it would have been an absolute luxury item. Yeah, but also, why would you use cotton when linen is a superior fiber in every way? Seems less appropriate for a base layer and way too inaccessibly expensive prior to the 16th century Iberia sea traders. Yeah, Nevis, absolutely. Silk. So silk breathes. Don't mistake me. Silk does breathe, but it doesn't breathe in the same way that linen breathes. So if you are in a hot climate, if you're in a humid climate, silk is not going to be super wonderful as your base layer. It's fine as an overlayer as long as you have a linen layer against your skin. It's not going to be super great as a base layer. Trust me. I did once upon a time make a silk kamicha and wore it as a base layer at Penzik, and it was wretched. Do I mean or Nevis, did you mean cotton? If you meant silk is not a super great base layer for an undergarment. And yeah, cotton is easier to dye. But yeah, for whatever reason, it just wasn't. No, they weren't making it. I don't know. I haven't read. I know why they didn't grow cotton in Europe, because the conditions weren't right for cotton plants. They just weren't. My screen just go dark. They just weren't. The conditions were. I actually looked into this because I was curious. We have sericulture in Europe. There's actually silkworm production in Europe, especially in the Mediterranean. There's silkworm production, so they were able to import that. But apparently in Europe, in the Europe part of the Mediterranean, the conditions are not right for cotton plants to grow. So yes, they do grow them in the southern parts of the US, but those aren't the same conditions as the southern Mediterranean. It's not the right combination of heat, moisture, and soil. So yeah, apparently. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I don't know. My phone has started doing this weird thing where suddenly it switches cameras. Okay, can everyone still hear me? Silk against the skin for Penzic. What do you need to atone for? Yeah, right? Would be pretty terrible. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments about smocks in the 15th century? Just let me know and I can certainly address them. I'm going to go ahead and keep getting dressed though. The next layer is the kirtle, as it's pronounced in 15th century English. And it's spelled, I think I'm up to 25 different spellings in 15th century English and Scots. If I combine the Scots sources with the English sources, then there's at least 25 different ways to spell the word kirtle, which can make doing text searches, electronic text searches, very interesting. So this is called a cotte or a cotte simple in French. It's called a gamora in Florence. Loud and clear, great. It's called a camora in Florence. And this still counts as a layer of underwear, which is another inflammatory thing I posted on my page. I dared to call two ladies and myself dancing in nothing but our kirtles, dancing in our underwear. I guess some people were really hoping to see us in like panties and bras. I don't know. But yeah, you have to remember that this layer is still a layer of underwear. It is worn under an over thing. This only counts as overwear in really in the privacy of my own quarters. And that is based on the fact that chronicles don't mention women going out in their kirtles unless they're doing things like being executed or whipped through the streets. And the visual representation of women in just a kirtle out of the privacy of their own homes or their own chambers is basically women being executed, see Joan of Arc, or peasants working in the fields. So I really think that this, in the mind of a 15th century lady, capital L, this would count as a layer of underwear. But I'm inviting you into my chambers to sew with me today. So I do not plan to go out into the greater world dressed like this. Actually, I do, but not today because it's going to be 107-degree Fahrenheit heat index here. But as my 15th century self, I would not go out dressed like this unless I were trying to go be incognito in the town square or something like that. So I'm lacing this up with a silk lace that I made myself. It's a finger looped lace made of silk, actually. And I'm using my lovely handmade bodkin for it, based on a replica from a Ghirlandaio painting. If you would like to buy one of these, check out Kate Ramsey on Etsy. You can tell her I sent you, but she's not a sponsor or anything. I found her shop. She has some really nice handmade reproduction medieval metal items. So I specifically wanted a replica of this because I'd seen it in a portrait, and seeing the replica of it made me say I need to have that. Yeah, scandalous. So yeah, if you're looking for a bodkin, or she also does replica handmade medieval sewing needles. So check out Kate Ramsey on Etsy. Yeah. Again, not a channel sponsor, just me putting the word out for the artisans and crafts people who make the things that I buy and use in my medieval life. Kate Ramsey, Ramsey. Kate Ramsey, not Ramses. Yeah, Ramsey. At least I'm assuming that's how her name is pronounced. I've only read it, so pronunciation question mark. Kate Ramsey, Ramsey. And I found her prices to be extremely reasonable for handcrafted items. So this is spiral lacing. It is hands down the most common form of lacing before the modern era. I mean, if I were to do a scientific meta study of portraiture, and compare the number of times you see spiral lacing versus ladder lacing, the page for ladder lacing would probably only take half a page. The page for spiral lacing would be their pages would be pretty infinite. And for those who asked me, what about cross lacing? I have no evidence of cross lacing for gowns to actually close gowns before the very, 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 very end of the 15th century in Florence. There's a couple of portraits, and it might not just be Florence, but Italy's at the very, like the 1495. Suddenly you see there's a couple of portraits that I recall offhand that have cross lacing. But the cross lacing isn't the way we do cross lacing. The cross lacing is very unique. It's actually where you take you basically wrap it around itself in the center, not actually crossing and going to the other side. Yeah, it's a unique form. So it's cross lacing is just not done. It's spiral lacing. And basically spiral lacing, my theory is that spiral lacing evolved from the idea of sewing a gown shut. And then someone realized, well, it's a real pain in the butt to always have to sew and unsew the gown. Why don't we just put some holes in and just use a lace to basically whip stitch it shut every time? Way easier, right? Yeah, is it a time thing or a layer reason why some laces were permanently pointed and some use a bodkin? Yeah, so that's a good question. So right, so Takeda's question is, I'm using a bodkin here instead of a point. So here's the interesting thing about the portrait in which that has this lace head on it. I'm calling it a bodkin, but the portrait that contains this lace head, it actually looks like the lace was woven onto the bodkin, which would actually in effect make it again a kind of chape. So my plan is actually, because I bought 5 of these, so my plan is actually to attempt to finger loop braid directly onto one of these bodkins, the braid, and then it will be permanent. But right now it's because I don't have the equipment to make points here, because the reality is that eglets and points were in fact built directly, as far as we can tell, were built directly onto the laces. So you didn't pre-manufacture a bunch of chapes, eglets, as many of you may know them, and then make your laces and then attach them. No, no, no. You made your laces, then the silkwomen made the laces, then the laces were sent to the pointer, or maybe purchased by the pointer, actually, possibly. And then the pointer pointed the laces, and then the pointer sold the laces on to the end, the end user. That seems to be how the process goes, and that makes total sense. For those of you who've attempted to apply pre-made shapes onto your laces of various sizes, real pain in the ass, isn't it? Right? Like, it's either too big, so you can easily fit the lace into it. The point is too big, the shape is too big, right? Or the shape is too small and then you're fighting to get it in. It's very rarely just the right size. Well, that's because that's not how points were made. Pointers weren't just people sewing. It's a whole profession, right? There's a whole name, pointer. Pointing is a whole profession in the Middle Ages. And so this should tell you it has a certain level of skill about it. And that it must be such a common and needful, necessary thing that there's someone whose whole job is to point. And every illustration of a pointer shows them pointing the laces directly. It doesn't show them making shapes and the laces are off to the side. No, it shows them with the lace in hand, building the shape around it. So at Pennsic last year, there was a class on pointing your own laces. I'm really hoping that they're going to offer the class again this year so that I can actually take the class and learn how to do it. But anyway, so yeah, I don't think I should be actually adding this on to the lace. It should be permanently attached to the lace too. Takeda, does that answer your question? Yeah, this is exactly, Nevis. Thank you. Fancy underwear. Yeah. Okay. So I seem to have missed some comments. Let me see what I missed. Will you make OnlyFans? No disrespect. So actually, and Pancake, no, I totally get that. So some of you may know that Bernadette Banner made an OnlyFans page for sexy Victorian and Edwardian ankles, and I thought it would be fun to start just for the same joke, because she just wanted to see what would happen, and she was shocked. Just to see what would happen if I started an OnlyFans page that was for medieval calves in medieval stockings. And by medieval stockings, I mean this. And just medieval calves and stockinged feet, just to see what would happen, because I'm real curious. Because these are not. I mean, they've got a little bit of stretch from the bias, but they're not skin fitting, right? You can't see the musculature, etc. So I'd be interested to run that same experiment just for poops and giggles, as they say. Yeah. Okay, so Kirtle is all done, and now we have to do something with my hair. I've got my hair in braids already today. Pin in there. Well, I think I just. So some of you ask me about medieval pins in your clothing and whether they will stick you. Usually not, but that's usually because I'm using medieval pins. These are modern pins. Medieval pins are pretty relatively thick and won't just poke through and get you. But modern super fine pins, yeah, they will. Ah, so I don't want to bleed all over my white koi, my not a koi, my kerchief that I'm about to put on. Anyway, my hair was already in braids because I slept. I keep my hair in braids for sleeping. And as always, I tie off the braids with medieval finger loop braiding with 15th century laces. So I don't use elastic or anything like that, not even in my modern life. Yeah. So I would pay for that. Medieval stockings for the win. Yeah, I've thought about doing it as a joke just because it's Bernadette Banner did it, and it seems like such a lark to see what's out there. So normally, I would have a lady in waiting tape my hair up to my head using ribbon, but instead we're just going to go with what I call the quick and dirty medieval bun, where I just basically take my braids, tie them in half knots until it makes its own little ball at the back of my skull. And now I'm going to endeavor. Of course, I got my thumb, like my most important part of your hand. Um, I'm now going to endeavor to put on my kerchief without getting blood stains on it. This is the new one that I made in my kerchief making workshop. Some of you participated in that. It was a lot of fun. So we're going to go ahead and put this on, and it's really simple to go on. This is one of the things I love about this. And let me tell you, people are always asking me, God, why did medieval women cover their hair? Well, I'll tell you, for one, it is way easier to toss my hair in braids and put on a kerchief than to do any modern hairstyle. Seriously, like this takes, if I were to start with the braids and go to kerchief, 5 minutes. I could time it, 5 minutes, start to end. Braid hair, kerchief on, and ready to go, right? Compared to a modern hairstyle that's going to take all kinds of hair product and styling tools and possibly chemical treatments, so especially if you've got short hair. God knows short hair needs even more effort to get it to look like something instead of a, a bad night at a club. So yeah, let me tell you, I sometimes wear a kerchief, this kerchief, in fact, this style of kerchief with my modern clothes because it's easier than doing anything useful with my hair, right? Like if you have a bad hair day, no problem. If you have a good hair day, no problem. Kerchief on, right? So there's a lot of good reasons to cover your hair that have nothing to do with any kind of religious dogma, with any kind of social compliance or social pressures, have nothing to do with any kind of morality, and everything to do with practical reasons, right? Right, yes, Nevis people, and not just women, men too. For many parts of history in the West, in the East, men and women all covered their hair. And when you're living in a society, in a world lit only by fire, there's all kinds of soot in the air. There's all kinds of dust floating around. And they absolutely had soap. They had ways of cleaning their hair, but they didn't have the same kind of surfactants until I'm not certain when. I think lye in Europe reaches Europe and sometime in the middle of the first millennium, like lye-based soap. But anyway, you don't really want to be using lye-based soap on your hair for any kind of. It's not really good for it. My point is that you want to keep your hair as protected as possible from all of that garbage that's just floating around. So, then of course there's the benefit. This going outside in the sun, it keeps me cool, right? Evaporative cooling and reflective properties. In the winter, it's an extra layer. Insulation keeps me warm, right? There's so many good reasons to cover your hair that have zero to do with any kind of morality. Yeah. What did people use for shampoo in the 15th century? So I was actually going to do a reading. So this week I'm continuing with medieval story time. I enjoyed reading to you all and discussing the texts that we were reading together, and you all seem to enjoy it as well. So at this week's medieval story time, I was thinking of reading some of the passages from the Trotula, which is a 12th century text, a gynecological text, but also a text uh, on cosmetics, on toiletries, and has recipes for toiletries and concoctions and potions to do a wide variety of very practical body care things. Amongst them is a recipe for a hair wash. And that recipe for a hair wash actually involves, they think it was composed in Salerno, so, southern Italy, right? We're talking lots of vineyards around. So that's why I think they say to use that's why the recipe in this case calls specifically to burn vines and grape leaves, grapevines and grape leaves, because they had so many of them that it was an extra thing they had laying around. And it actually says to take the ash and mix that with water, and that will make a good hair wash. So it seems that in 15th century, the likely candidate for a hair wash would have basically been a lye solution, because potash, that's just lye. Basically, that's what you end up with in the ashes, right? And so basically it was a lye solution. Now, of course, I'm confident it was not so, it's not going to be so caustic that it's leaving, it's melting your skin away or anything like that. I don't remember if it mentioned ratios or not in the original recipe. Honestly, I'd be shocked if it mentioned ratios in the original recipe, because medieval recipes for most anything, whether edible or otherwise, are not that crystal clear. But we'll find out together maybe when I review the text together during our medieval story time with the Contessa. So yeah, it seems that a hair wash would have been a lye solution. And obviously there's no thickeners, so it's going to be nothing like modern shampoo, right? The idea would be is that you'd have a basin and you'd sit down over the basin, and we have illustrations of women washing their hair from the 15th century, and they're over top of the basin and their hair is over their head, and they're basically pouring with a ewer, they're pouring liquid over their hair. And I'm assuming that the liquid that's being depicted in these illuminated miniatures is probably this lye solution that's mentioned in the Trotula. Now, granted, probably not everyone you don't have to use grape leaves and grapevines, right? That's probably I know that's what they had in abundance in southern Italy, right? But in other places, you have other things that you can burn into ash and then make a solution. So that seems to be what medieval shampoo was, yeah. Let me see. I'm driving. Medieval products will sell like soap and detergent. Gotta work on gimmicks. Green light. Advances in indoor plumbing and shampoo made it easier to frequently wash the hair than before. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Covering the hair for men and women was common up until the beginning of the 20th century, simply because of the ash and soot in the air. Yeah, I mean, 100%. But here's the other thing that people don't think about. At the end of the 19th century, the second half of the 19th century, is when all the Industrial Revolution, right? Then suddenly all these products start getting produced to address a wide variety of ills, right? And suddenly they're talking about, oh, well, your hair, you need to wash it all the time. Okay, but if you wash it all in here, we want you to use our product, and you need to do it. You need to do multiple washes a time, and you should do it multiple times a week. Well, of course, the shampoo manufacturer is going to tell you that they want you to use more of their product, right? And then, oh my gosh, you've stripped the oils from your hair, so now your hair is dry as straw. Well, they've made a product for that too. Now there's conditioner. The reality is that with the medieval comb, and as long as you're keeping your hair relatively covered and you're not in the modern world with modern pollution, right? That's different. We live in a very polluted world now. The air is even dirtier, honestly, especially in cities. It's possibly dirtier than it was in the Middle Ages. I'll be frank with you. But in general, a medieval comb with its fine tines will actually clean your hair. It will actually pull off the dust. It will pull off the detritus. It will remove excess oil, and it will distribute the good oil from your scalp, which, by the way, is calibrated for your hair. and will distribute the oils along the shaft of your hair. So there isn't a need really to shampoo your hair unless you live in a really dirty environment, extra dirty. And the second you stop stripping the oils from your scalp stops producing so much oil, and eventually your scalp will balance out. You really don't need to wash your hair that often. Depends on your environment. Some people live in environments that they haven't evolved for, but yeah, modern shampoos and conditioners, not only is it easier to wash every day thanks to drainage and showers and whatnot, but we've trained ourselves to think we have to strip our hair every day in order for it to be clean. Yeah. Me with the medieval horn comb. Yeah. The wooden combs, I think, are probably best for distributing the oils. Obviously, the luxury combs in the medieval period were made of ivory or bone, which is, bone is all ivory is bone, not all bone is ivory. So, yeah. The ivory combs, I've never tried it. I've never had an ivory comb before, just putting that out there, or a bone comb. I've only had wooden combs. So I can't speak for how effective they are at distributing the oil, but wooden combs are really great at making your hair nice and silky. Yeah. Let's see. In Spain, would they use grapevines for hair washing? Susan, I'm confident in parts of Spain they would. Spain definitely had its own viticulture. But, it depends. Spain is, the Iberian Peninsula is one of these amazing countries that has, basically it's got the Pacific Northwest, like areas like the Pacific Northwest, like the North Coast is basically like the Northwest of the US, or the Southeast of Canada, or Southwest of Canada. It's rainforest, and it's moist, and it's mild. And then, in the South, in Extremadura, there's literally desert, so deserty that's where they were filming spaghetti westerns back in the 50s, right? And then in the southwest, in the southeast of Spain, you've got kind of more the typical Mediterranean climate, kind of lightly arid with lots of olive trees and vines. And then, up in the northeast again, it starts to get more sort of continental European climate. So depends on where you are in Spain. It's going to change what you would use, depending on the kind of things that you could add in abundance to just burn and turn into ash. Yeah, vinegar for hair. It's funny. I don't remember reading about the use of vinegar in hair care in the Trotula. So, I'm saying offhand, I don't recall. I did not prepare hair care as a special topic for today. I did want to experiment with making my own lye solution, but living in an apartment as I do right now, I think that people would object if I went up to the top of the roof and burned some whatever greenery I can find around here, and to make a potash. So that experiment might have to wait for Penzing, probably. I can probably get away with that experiment at Penzing. Yeah. Boar bristle brushes. We have zero evidence of hair brushes in the medieval era. It's all combs. Just the way it is. No one felt a need for a boar bristle brush. And I don't know why we suddenly switched from combs to boar bristle brushes. It could be a factor of the way hairstyles were changing. Maybe a brush is more effective for creating certain kinds of bouffant hairstyles, like the sorts that came about especially in the 18th century. I don't know. But I have no evidence of bristle brushes being used on human hair in the Middle Ages. Bristle brushes being used on horses? Absolutely. Bristle brushes being used on human hair? I haven't seen evidence for it. Yeah. Okay, I'm not done yet with getting dressed. Sorry, tangent. Okay, next layer, I'm going to go ahead and put on my belt, even though I do not plan on going outside again today. I got my outdoor time before our session. I took a 2.5-hour walk to take advantage of the clean air and the mild temperatures before it gets back up to 39 degrees today, or 100 degrees with a heat index of 107. So this is what's called a demiscent. Right, and it has one of the features it has, and I'll show you up close. This is a purse hanger, right? So it's an extra piece of hardware harness, as it was referred to in 15th century sources. It's an extra piece of harness that attaches to the belt, and then you attach the purse, your pouch, your aumonier, or whatever, to the hanger, so that you're not damaging the leather of your belt, right? So That is a must-have for anyone who likes to have a nice ammonia from their belt. You should have your nice purse hanger. Don't just attach the purse strings to the belt. It will actually kind of crumple it and stretch it in weird ways, especially if you carry anything heavy. And we did talk about knitting last time. This is, in fact, a knit pouch, and I need to do some repairs on it. This is a knit pouch based on some of the extant knit pouches that we have from Spain, actually. So yeah, we talked about medieval knitting. This is in fact one, and it was a gift for me when I was Queen of Drachenwald, for those of you who are in the SCA, hence the little fleur-de-lis in the red wool. And this is naturally dyed wool. So yeah, very, very lovely. It was a wonderful present. Unfortunately, it was a gift to me from an unknown artisan, and there was no name attached to it. So if you recognize this pouch and you know who made it, please let me know. They would have been in Europe, probably. I'm going to assume probably in England actually at the time, but maybe not. Anyway, it's called a demescent belt because it's demescent means a half belt, right? And that's because it doesn't actually meet right. It's around my hips, and it meets part of the way, but not all of the way, right? And so, and there's somewhere you see it where it sits here. Now, the nice thing about a demescent belt for a woman is that it is extremely adjustable because it's a hook and a chain, and the chain allows you to expand or collapse the demescent belt as needed. You don't have to worry about adding extra holes in. And for women who are constantly going through cycles of pregnancy and not pregnancy, this would have been a really wonderful idea for a belt for certain. Why do I see medieval Ellie Woods with a pouch for her wee bruiser to hang in? Oh, yeah, I need to make one of those for a purse for my wife. Yeah. Pancake, it was a gift. It was specifically a gift. Yeah, so this is my demescent belt. No, this is not an Armor and Castings piece, but Armor and Castings is having a belt sale right now. The last couple, I think it's the last 2 days of their belt sale, 30% off all of their belt harnesses, and they've got a lot of really nice demescent sets, really nice ones. So if you'd like a demescent belt, go check out armorandcastings.com. 30% off all belt sets, including the really gorgeous Burgundian ones, right? And of course, as always, if you enter Contessa 10, you'll get an extra 10% off of your purchase. So they are a channel sponsor. 100% will admit that. No obfuscation. Okay, so next we're going to do stockings, but actually we're going to do stocking singular because I pulled out my stockings and I realized that this one, the last time I wore it last week, and I went out and I walked around, I took a nice long walk in the afternoon because it's such a beautiful day. And now there's all kinds of holes in it. So part of today's session is going to be fixing the holes in my stockings. So stocking one. So I will put on one stocking, not awkward at all, right? And normally I actually put my stockings on before I put the kirtle on, but I got distracted by our conversation. So stockings require garters. This is what garters were originally for. Garters were originally, they weren't a sexy item. They were a practical item. They're how you kept your stockings up. Men and women, by the way. I saw one weird myth that it was only men who wore garters. And I'm like, women need them more than men do, because men held their stockings up by attaching them to their braids, to their underpants, right? That's how they held them up originally. And then eventually they switched that attachment to their doublets, their coats. Women never did that. Women only have knee-high stockings. So women have to have garters. Otherwise they won't stay up. Some of the weird things that people pass around, I don't know. It's the ideas that people have. Okay, so these are made of linen. We actually have some extant stockings made of linen, and they are invariably cut on the bias. So even though there isn't much that's cut on the bias in medieval tailoring, these absolutely were. And we actually have a full pair of hosen, linen hosen from the early 16th century, men's hosen, like joined hosen, complete with a codpiece. They're also cut on the bias. So yes, we actually definitely for certain have evidence of linen hosen from starting, I think the earliest pair of linen hosen I've seen, extant pair, I think dates to the 13th century. That's just what I've seen, or there could be earlier. Yeah, okay. So, and the garter, as always, when you're putting a garter on, I always recommend that you put the strap to the outside. Don't You don't want the strap-ins fighting with each other for dominance between your calves. You want them on the outside. And I'm not going to put on the second one because today's part of today's part of today's demonstration is going to be patching hosen. Now, 2 or 3 sessions ago, sewing parties ago, I mentioned patching hosen, and someone said, "Strange, my mother used to darn her stocks." You can't darn. This is not knit. This is fabric. These are cut cloth stockings. You can't darn them. I mean, I guess you could try to weave the linen, but no one would do that in the Middle Ages. They patched this, so we're patching them. Darning is something you do with knit goods, for the most part. We're going to be patching these. Yeah. So that will be part of today's session. Also, Tommy's sacked out. You see the sacked out kitty over there? He is passed out. He just took a bath and now he's ready for his nap. Oh, you're such a cutie. Okay, so last week I promised you shoes. I have brought a pair. I'm not going to put them on because I don't need to, but I'll show them to you anyway. These are what I call my outdoor shoes. This is what a pair of 15th century turn shoes looks like. We see this style all across Europe, in Italy and France and England, right? This is especially, you see this especially on Italian women. The few times you see their shoes, because you don't often see them in the 15th century, they really look a lot like this. And this is after wearing. You can see the wear and tear. You can see exactly how I walk on the balls of my feet pretty heavily and not very much on my heels. That's definitely also from medieval dancing. And you can see how over time the toe has naturally curled up. It didn't start that way. They started flat like this. Over time, the toe just curls up, right? And I actually put on the inside, I don't use modern inserts. I actually use felted wool inserts to give me a little extra padding underneath. Now, I can't think of any actual evidence I found of woolen inserts. Something in my brain is, some little bell is going off in my brain saying, yes, you've seen. I'm trying to think if maybe it was a Museum of London find where they actually found some wool inside the shoe and they assumed that it was, for padding, something like that. But don't quote me on that. But this is very plausible, right? They definitely felted wool, absolutely felted wool. And there's no reason that you wouldn't want to put a layer like this in your shoes to give it just a little extra padding. And a felted wool insert makes so much sense because when it wears down, you take it out and you can maybe refluff it, or you can put it to some other use, right? When it wears, if you wear it out a lot. But I've had this, I think these I got at Penzic last year. There's a merchant who sells them, thankfully, the Basket Man, for those of you who know him, he sells them. And they come in a kind of, a size, and then you trim them down to fit your shoe exactly. And it's fantastic because wool is antimicrobial. So it also, prevents your shoes from getting microbe ridden. And it provides that nice extra layer of padding, and it keeps things smelling fresh. There's just so many benefits to just having this little layer of wool. Now, I know a lot of you say, but my arches. Modern footwear has broken us, people. It has broken us. It has broken our skeletons. It's why we have so many back and hip and neck problems, really. It's why your knees are deteriorating. It's why your hips are deteriorating, because modern shoes with all of that arch support have really broken us. And you think about us evolving. How did humans tolerate life before there was artificial arch support? Right? So you don't actually need it. You can train your feet to actually get strong enough to not need arch support. I did. I used to have the most arch support. I used to have the most crazy inserts you can imagine in shoes. I've got heel spurs, by the way. Crazy heel spurs. Really vile looking heel spurs. I managed to train my feet to be strong enough to not need that. So yeah, you all might want to think about that. But if you do medieval turn shoes, if you start wearing them, you have to train yourself to walk differently, people. You can't walk heel toe anymore. You can't do it. If you're wearing a pair of pattens, maybe, but only if your pattens are padded, because you're going to kill your heels, right? You need to actually walk toe heel, not heel toe, right? So you're actually using the muscles in your foot to actually control your gait, right? So just think about that. If you make the transition to medieval footwear, and I recommend it, I do, if you're going to do medieval living history events, You need to work your way up to it. You need to practice. You need to practice walking in it. You need to be a little more conscientious about how you walk so that you don't actually damage your feet by walking as though you're still wearing 3 feet of padded foam underneath of you. Takeda says, I just recently switched to filterable inserts. They are wonderful. Yeah, they really are. I mean, it's great. No foot smell at all as I literally inhale pieces of wool. Okay, are there any questions about these turn shoes? These are made by Bohemond, Boots by Bohemond, for those who know him. Also not a channel sponsor. I've been getting my shoes from Bohemond for years and years and years. He, stands by his product. If you get a pair and they break or wear out, you can take them and get them repaired or replaced, if it happens too quickly. So yeah, so Neva says striking with the heel is optimal for some exercises. Sure. But you don't want to do it with a bare heel that isn't padded, and you don't want to do it as your baseline method. Yeah, exactly. Heel to toe for close quarters combat. Yeah, that's a different thing. But also when you're stepping for close quarters combat, you're still stepping super carefully and you're using the muscles in your feet. You're not just smacking. Watch the average person walk. Pay attention to how you normally walk. You're going to find that you just slam your heel into the ground and you let the front half of your foot just smack the ground, right? When you're doing that kind of the ninja walk, right? That's different. That's a whole different thing. Most people, when they're walking just a walk, don't ninja walk, as I call it. Yeah, but absolutely. For close quarters combat, that's a different thing. But on the other hand, for close quarters combat, you also need to be able to be up on your toes to move around quickly and dash and dodge and whatnot. It's one of the reasons I tell 14th and 15th century practitioners of 14th and 15th century martial arts that they should absolutely take up 14th and 15th century dance, because it will absolutely help them gain so much dexterity in their martial art. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's see. So I've got my kerchief on, I've got my belt on. We talked about the shoes that I'm not going to bother putting on. Oh, right. So some of you have seen that I have lit my Facebook page on fire with my post about medieval women's underwear, as I predicted would happen. So I didn't bring a pair of my underwear this time. I actually brought a pair of a reproduction, my replica of 15th century men's brays. And so just to show you, they have to be large enough to fit around the hips and drawstring. There's a drawstring in the top that actually makes them sit, and we need to actually put in, I don't know why, this is artificial sinew. It should be finger loop braiding that goes in here, a lace. But this is 15th century men's whitey tighties, right? It's got a pouch for access to bits for quick relief processes. But for number 2, you still have to remove them, right? And so for those of you who are men and you're wondering about what 15th century men wore, this is one of these several. There's several models in the 15th century. There's the boxer briefs. There's or the boy shorts version. There's the tie on the sides version, actually like the ones I have. And then there's basically this version. And those are kind of the options. And here, I brought this out not just as a, medieval show and tell, medieval men's underwear. So talking about underwear, one of the things I think about when you see you see images of that people say is an example of women wearing the pants in the family from the 15th and the 16th century, usually, especially in the second half of the 15th century. And I think actually, and that's an example of, well, women didn't wear underwear because if they put underpants on, then that makes them a man. No, my theory is actually, it's not just putting on underpants that transforms the woman into the man of the house. I think it's putting on men's underpants, because if you notice, these are very much specifically for men who have bits that need extra support and extra access points, right? So I'm pretty certain that statement of, the women wearing the breeches. No, she's wearing man's breeches. They're showing her putting on men's breeches, but women had different kinds of breeches, obviously. That's my theory. And as we get sewing, I'm going to talk about why that's my theory. And it's a linguistic argument, actually. Anyway, questions about men's underpants? Yeah. No, these are not. Linen would get clammy? No, linen is the opposite of clammy. Linen breathes really well. Linen gets clammy. Linen is the ultimate in humid, hot and humid fabric. It breathes super well. Yeah. Yeah, well, a different access point. Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, no, linen is the quintessential hot weather fabric. It's one of the best. Nettle cloth might be better. Hemp might be slightly better, but yeah, linen is what you want. It will not get clammy. Linen is great for undergarments. No clam about it. Super dry, dries really quickly, whisks that moisture away. Yeah. No, it doesn't absorb. So linen does not absorb. Linen wicks the moisture to the outer layer, and then you can have evaporative cooling. No, not clammy at all. I wear linen. I wear linen underpants all the time. No clammy, nothing clammy. Yeah, yeah. Plastic clothes suck for certain. No, but yeah, linen is the choice of fabric for underpants all the way until the 18th century, maybe, or the 19th century. They switched to linen or to cotton. But until that point, it's linen for under things. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, linen, exactly. Linen breathes and it doesn't chafe. Yes, exactly, Nevis. So cotton will chafe when it gets wet. Linen does not chafe as much as cotton will. Okay, so let's get to. I'm going to have to clear a spot for myself now because the kitty of the palace has decided it's uh it's his time to nap in the place where I planned to sit, apparently. Oh, bling. I forgot I was going to put on bling today. Well, I can do that sitting down. Honey, honey, baby. I need you to move just the tiniest bit. It doesn't have to be much. You can just slide over here. There we go. He's super silky. It's really easy to move him. He's so silky that he will fall off of furniture if he's not positioned correctly. He'll literally just slide right off. Okay. Bling. My Maria Portinari collar, another piece that drives people crazy because they say I shouldn't be wearing it if I'm wearing a kirtle. Well, this is my version of at-home casual for a noblewoman, because noblewomen in the 15th century, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, I'm confident that they like to bling up to even when they were in home only, in private quarters only. The only experience I have is that I sewed my nightgown in linen and it is moist in the morning from sweat, but my cotton nightgown isn't. That's very interesting, Savvy. I have the opposite experience. Interesting. Are you certain it was linen? Are you certain it was 100% linen? That can be a problem. Poor kitty, too silky for his own safety. Yeah, he is. You can see the panic on his face when he starts to slide off of something. Okay, so I'm going to get started today with I've got so many good things lined up for us today, everyone. I've got some really interesting books. Some of you have been asking me about resources for Korean medieval studies. So I've got some of my Korean history books here to share with you. And I'm actually also working on, speaking of underwear, I'm working on a pair of 17th century Korean women's underpants. Here's one leg, there's the other, and basically it makes culottes, what we might know as culottes modernly. And this is made of hemp. This is actually hemp that is woven in the width that would be appropriate for medieval hemp, actually. And this would actually be a layer. It's going to get pleated into a band, so it'll actually flare out. And this is one of those underlayers that creates the bulk that you see in 16th, 17th, and 18th century Korean clothing on the women, right? This is one of those bulk out the overskirts layer, but it's also an underpants layer. So I've now officially delved into the world of historical Korean clothing making. So, but first I definitely want to repair. Tommy's on my patch. He's on the linen patch for repairing these. Sorry, baby. I don't know how you all managed to figure out what fabric it is I plan on using and laying down upon it. Okay, so when you are repairing stockings. And for those of you who actually do living history in medieval stockings, you will need to repair these, unless you don't actually dance and walk and live like a medieval person in them. But if you actually look at extant medieval shoes, nearly always they have clobbering, patching, like right here. And the stockings that have survived nearly always have patches here and here. So my big toe, for instance, eats through every single sock ever in the history of my life, basically. Um, and the, you know, from my dancing and walking on the front halves of my feet, as I naturally do when I'm in medieval shoes, will do now that I've trained myself, wear and tear there. So I have to think about how I want to do this patch. The reality is I know myself. And I know that although the hole has started here, that I can feel that all along here, if you touch the fabric, you can feel that it's thin and you can feel where it is thinning. So even though a hole hasn't formed there yet, I can tell by ascertaining the thickness of the linen that more of it is about to go. So it actually is going to make sense for me to make a bigger patch. So whenever you're going to patch something, check, do it, use your fingers to test and see how thin, how frail the fabric around the hole is and how far the frail part extends, because that will tell you how big your patch needs to be. You really, ideally, you don't want to just patch just the hole and then have new holes form here because it's already on its way. Instead, I can make a patch that basically covers this whole area and we're good. And that's what we're going to do. And then I'm probably going to do I might even do a wraparound patch. I might even just wrap the patch all the way around from the top here where my toe has eaten through the stocking. Let me demonstrate that. I think I might actually, where my toe has eaten through the stocking, my big toe, I might actually take the patch all the way around the front, the top down to the underneath and continue it, because I can feel how thin this linen is. Continue it basically to about here, to about halfway down is probably what I'm going to do. And yeah, I could actually, if I wanted, do an amputation. I could just cut off the entire, this entire thing and just replace it with something, another thing. But I didn't make these, I bought them. So I don't have this linen. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put a big patch over the whole thing and see if I like what happens over time. Yeah. Yeah, it's almost impossible to find affordable fustian in the US now. Yeah, and of a good quality. By the way, I found out by reading in the collection of essays, Medieval Fabrications, the word fustian comes from the city from which it was exported, in which it was primarily made, Fusta, which is a city in Egypt. And so apparently that is where the word fustian comes from, because that is where they were growing. Of course, they were growing cotton in Egypt as well. Egypt is the right climate for it. And so they were weaving fustian and linen also. So linen, there was definitely linen. There was a linen export industry for linen coming out of Egypt. And so, you know, it was just natural for them to make a compound fabric, linen and cotton. Fustian is born. So that is apparently the origin of the word fustian as the fabric. Let's see, thickness or weave might be important. Yeah. Yeah, okay, that's another good point. The thickness or weave of your linen could also matter, because there are different weaves and there are different thicknesses, right? Like this is a pretty thick, this is actually fustian. So funny you should say that about affordable fustian being hard to find. There is a fabric vendor at Penzic who sells what they call linen. It's definitely cotton linen blend, which is fustian. So, yeah. Um, so this is actually a kind of fustian here. Yeah. So what I do basically when I start with my patches is I kind of gauge how much I'm going to need. And I always I always save all these scraps. Like, I always take pro tip from me about conservation and recycling and etc. So I always, when I have a sewing project, I always take the scraps from the sewing project and I put them in an envelope or a bag, and I label what the bag based on what the garment was. So for instance, in this case, this would be scraps from the new farsetto that I'm making for the condottiero, right? So I would put them all in a baggie. And then when I need replacement, when I need patches for that garment that I've made, I already have a bag of pre-assembled patches ready to go in exactly the right fabric. And it's a good way to not just waste your scraps, right? Because even little pieces like this, you're going to end up needing patches if you actually wear your clothes in any kind of real way, like I do. You're going to need patches, and that way you already have exactly the right fabric, well organized, ready to go. I have a box, like a chest of bags of scraps. So obviously can't necessarily file them the same way because scraps can be kind of bulky. But I actually have a chest of the bags of all the scraps labeled, and I just rifle through the chest until I find the right bag with that matches the garment that needs a patch. So for instance, somewhere I do have a bag of scraps of this linen so that when I need to patch this, which I'm going to have to do sooner than later, it's worn pretty thin in the underarm area. This area where I move a lot, apparently, it's like it's threadbare and fraying. So I'm going to have to do something drastic here. But I have a baggie with scraps of this linen, and all I have to do is go get the baggie out, and then I have the scraps I need to make the patches. So yeah, I'm a scrap hoarder myself. Nice. Do make quilts. So Savvy, what do you mean patchwork quilt, or do you mean a quilt, a 2 layers of fabric with padding between it that's quilted in a pattern and possibly put on a bed, but maybe also hung on a wall? So yeah, remember there's a difference between a patchwork quilt and quilting. Patchwork quilt is a special beast. Anyway, yeah, PTS Demon says that's why I collect every piece of hardware, screw, butt washer. You never know. Yep, exactly. So basically, what I do with these handy dandy scraps is, in this case, because it's my foot, it's a little more challenging because it's this, very three-dimensional, weirdly three-dimensional shape. So I'm just going to take my linen scrap and I'm going to, just kind of gauge how much I'm going to need to accomplish this mission, as it were. And, basically my idea on the sole is that I'm just going to patch the whole sole. Like basically, just I might as well. I know what my feet do. My feet eat socks, just all of it, the whole sock. Patchwork, yeah. So in Europe, I have not seen any evidence of patchwork quilting before the 1700s. I don't know why that is. I don't know why. You would think there's obviously some shift about how scraps get used or recycled or upcycled. Um, and that means that whatever the things we were using them for before, we've stopped using them for. So I don't know why, but we have quilts, but I haven't seen patchwork quilts. Now, what I have seen in Sweden, in Scandinavia, at least in the 15th century and maybe earlier, they have what are called intarsia quilts. These are not made with scraps, though. They are intentional. So an intarsia quilt is where you take a square, you cut out a design in 2 different colors. So maybe we'll say orange and gold, right? Or yellow and gold, gold and red, gold and red. And you have 2 squares. You have a gold square, you have a red square. And you cut out exactly the same design in both of them. We'll say a, a lion for heraldic purposes, right? And then you take the cutouts and you swap them into the frame, the remaining frame. So that over here, you'll have a gold frame with a red lion, and over here, you'll have a red frame with a golden lion. And then they take those squares and they attach them together in a patchwork. But that's not scraps. And that's the only example I can think of offhand of quilting, of making a patchwork wall hanging. And that's just it. We think these were wall hangings and not for bedding necessarily, but still, that's the earliest example that springs to mind offhand. Yeah. I have no example. I don't think darning eggs. I have not seen a darning. Joanne, good question. Are darning eggs period? By period, you mean before 1600? I'm going to assume, just to make sure we're talking about the same era. I have not seen an example of a darning egg, which doesn't mean that they didn't exist. I just haven't seen it. I'm going to think that probably if darning eggs came into existence, they probably sprang up and by the end of the 16th century, because that's when knit stockings come into vogue, as the 16th century. And before that, you're not going to need a darning egg. so much because you're not going to need that kind of shape to fix knitting. Before that, knitting seems to be used for pouches. It seems to be used for household items like pillows, pillow covers, and in the end of the 15th century, you have evidence of knit caps. But you're not going to really need a darning egg to fix any of those things. So I haven't seen evidence of a darning egg. I'm going to assume that they would probably have something like that would have been created by some point in the 16th century to handle the repairs on the stockings. Yeah. But again, 16th century is not my area of expertise. So, I have a better than passing knowledge of it, but not the same depth as 15th century and earlier. Yeah. Okay, so I've now got my patch all lined up here. Oh, Tommy baby, you're such a cutie. Such a cutie. Yes, you are. He's such a sweet baby. He really is. He can't purr. He's like, he is, I don't think he has the purring mechanism. Whatever it is that makes cats purr, he doesn't have it. It's very sad because he makes the purring face and he gets really happy when we pet him, but he can't actually purr. And he still has his suckle response because his mother died when he was about 5 weeks old. So he never got that pheromone that stops, that weans kitties. Okay, so actually, just to show you, this is my pin cushion and my pin case. It's one of the Billy and Charlie replica needle cases, and I have one for needles and one for pins. I have no example of pin cushions before 1506, I think, in Italy, in Florence. That's the earliest pincushion reference I can seem to find. I wonder if the practice of patchwork wall hangings was to mimic the reverse tile work. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yes. That's a pretty good theory. I hadn't thought about that. For those who don't know what that's referencing, so for much of the Middle Ages in Western Europe, the floors are made with these beautiful tiles, multicolored tiles, and there's often an inverted pattern. So you'll have one tile, it'll make like a chessboard. So one tile will be like a gold framing with a black line, and the next tile will be black framing with a gold line, and alternating on and on. So yeah, right. If the intarsia patchwork wall hanging is a mimicking of that, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Good point. Okay, so now I'm going to just go ahead and pin this on just kind of loosely just to get it, make sure that it's where I want things to be. Fortunately, the problem with pewter is that it's malleable, which is fine if you don't travel and take suitcases and have porters who are gorillas and literally just seem to use your suitcases for warfare. So this has unfortunately been a little smushed. So the amount of pins I put in were easy. It was easy to get them out before this top part got smushed because, pewter is a pretty soft metal, actually. The reason it can't be used for knives, or to make the blade of a knife, rather. Okay, so I'm just pinning this onto the sole. And just to do a kind of test on the patch and make sure that I have enough of the linen, that it's covering all the things I actually want it to cover. And I can tell out the gate that it's not. It has migrated. And this is kind of the challenge of fixing a sole of a stocking, is that you have to keep your hand in here so that you don't accidentally pin or sew all the way through to the foot, the top of the foot of your stocking. Okay. Ooh, basic tornadoes? Are you actually seeing tornadoes? I've only ever seen a tornado on the water in Jeju Island. It's part of a winter hurricane, basically. I have never seen a tornado on land. And some of you may say, yeah, that's probably for the better. Elena, nice to see you. Elena, welcome. Happily, I can see you anyway, in my broadcasting software. So, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. The application of damn it. Ugh, ugh, I hate this restream makes me so cancel. No, don't reload the site. Gosh darn it. The application of the fabric to the underside with patterns cut away is modernly known as. Darn it, sorry. It's not letting me see that comment. Unfortunately, the screen works in such a way that if I touch a comment, it covers it in blue, which is great because I can't see it then. And then it shows it on the screen, which is not my intention. Okay. So I'm just. The application of the fabric to the underside with patterns cutaways, modernly known as reverse applique to the underside. Interesting. Reverse. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. Reverse applique. Yeah, that tracks actually. Yeah, I don't think they actually know what the technique was called in Scandinavia in the era. I think the intarsia is what people are calling it now, because intarsia is not a Scandinavian word to start with. Um, but I don't know if they've actually. I haven't delved deeply into it, so I don't know if anyone has looked at expense accounts or inventories or records from, say, 15th century Sweden or Norway or Denmark to see if it's referenced in any kind of identifiable way. Problem is that often many textiles are not identified in a way that's clear enough to distinguish it from others of its general category, by which I mean, for instance, um, if it were a wall hanging, then it could say that it might just identify it as a wall hanging made of such and such material of these colors with this kind of pattern, like it's made of it's has a lion pattern, but it might not specify that it's an intarsia technique, or it might not specify the alternating colors, right? Clerks don't necessarily care about those details. What they care about are the details that generally affect being able to identify it, especially if it's a will or a probate inventory, or uh, key identifiers for value, right? That all matters. Okay, so I have pinned this in place like so, just kind of there, and I can see that it's wrapping around the toe, but if I want it to actually get over, you can see it wraps around like that, but here's my fingers. So it doesn't actually cover that hole that my big toe formed. So I have a choice here. If I angle that like that, then it will wrap around my toe, which is actually okay because that naturally falls at that angle. And then it will cover that spot. And then I can basically, in doing that, I can sort of, cover that entire toe area, which is probably going to end up needing it anyway because my toes are evil. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I will never, ever, ever, you will never get to see my bare toes if I can help it. Dancers' feet, they're not pretty, at least not in the toe area. My toenails, they, a lifetime of doing things on toes has not stood them well in good standing. Right, so I'm just going to bring this across like this, and I'm actually keeping my hand spanned, by which I mean spreading my fingers out to make certain that I don't accidentally crumple in and make it smaller, make the foot smaller by putting this patch on. So I'm using my hand as a frame like that, right? So if you're doing stocking repairs, make sure that you are also using your hand as a frame. Or if you don't have a hand, I mean, if you're somehow working one-handed, then you could also get a last. If you have a shoe last, that would work too for this exercise, actually. Probably just as well. Maybe I have more dexterity this way than I would with a last. But Haley, there you are. Oh, goodness gracious, I've been missing you. I'd wondered. Philip and I were talking about you in the positive the other day. Okay, so Yeah, sorry, handsome. Your comment ended up on the screen because of, the restream hit the comment thing and there it shows. Very annoying. Okay, so I'm going to angle this up, put my finger over here, specifically here to make sure that we keep that tension there. And I'm going to go ahead and pin this here. And then what I'm going to do before I proceed any further with any kind of sewing or anything, I'm going to slip it onto my foot and test it out to make sure that, with the patch kind of basically outlined in pins, that it will still do the thing I need it to do, i.e. fit on my foot. So here we go, putting it on. All the pins are on the outside, so don't worry. You shouldn't hear me screaming in pain, hopefully. We'll see what happens. Okay, put it on. Everything seems pretty good. Yep. In fact, now that I've got it on my foot, I can see that there's a lot of extra bagginess that is actually formed around the edges here. So I can actually probably take this opportunity to eliminate some of that excess stocking anyway. Because, with medieval turn shoes, they're pretty fitted. You don't need, you don't want lots of excess fabric if you don't need the excess fabric. And this linen is sufficiently stretched that I don't think I do. Yeah, okay. Okay. The Japanese have a neat method of patching clothes because fabric was so expensive to make. It's called sashiko. Oh, interesting. Um, Koreans also, of course, fabric in Korea was especially expensive after the Imjin War. Before that, they had pretty good ties with, everywhere. As I discovered by reading a report from 5th and 6th century tombs, in kind of, I guess, probably an hour from where I currently am to hour and a half from where I currently am. Apparently, they found some amazing textiles in these tombs, things I wasn't expecting from the 5th and 6th centuries. Silks, brocaded taffeta, damask, ramie, linen, cotton, cloth of gold. So really, really luxurious fabrics in these tombs. And I just wasn't expecting that from 5th and 6th century Korea. But then I think about the direct connections to the Middle Kingdom, to Tang, to Qing, and to Tang. And then I realized that, yeah, of course, there would be access to fabrics. There's not an ocean that they have to cross to get the silk. There's not even a continent. It's literally directly tied as a client kingdom. So, but after the Imjin War, Joseon got very poor. And so then they really started having to use fabrics in a whole different way. Okay. Where are my scissors? Man, Tommy is sacked out. Tommy. Yeah, I have a kitty cat channel, Kitties of the Palace, and I've been live streaming them sleeping. And I'll tell you, some people get really worried about them being dead because I guess they don't have cats and they don't of their own, and they don't understand just how amazingly cats can sleep. Like seriously, cats are professional Olympic grade level sleepers. They take sleep to a whole new level. They really do. Oh, thank you. Right, I needed to rotate the collar around actually. Right, there it is. Okay. Thank you, Takeda. Oh, so I know it sounds like Tommy, but this is Tami, Tami, which means glutton in Korean, in Chinese characters. Because when he was a little baby kitten, apparently he would not stop eating. his foster mommy, the woman who adopted him when he was freshly rescued and raised him until I came into his life. He apparently just ate and ate and ate and ate and ate. So they named him Tommy, Tami. And then his brother Timmy, who's over there in the cat carrier sleeping right now, that means angry. Because he was feral, and his foster person did not know how to handle feral kittens, and so they basically thought it'd be great to have a kitten, and they didn't realize that you have to actually interact, like you have to force interaction, you have to tempt, force is the wrong word, you have to encourage in a very persuasive manner interaction with feral kittens. You can't just let them be feral, and he didn't. So when we got Chimi, he had just been taken back from the foster who didn't know how to handle kittens, and we basically had to socialize him. But so he came to us with the name Chimi, which apparently means angry, angry one. Now, of course, he's super duper sweet. It was no problem. We did the oldest trick in the book. We used food, and eventually he, came to love us because he realized that we were the source of food. Yeah. But yeah, so that's why it's Tommy, Tami, Tommy, and Chimi. Angry kitty, yeah. But now he's no longer a glutton. Now he's much more moderate eater. He grew up. He lost his glutton appetite, but the name is there. We're not changing their names. It's the names they came to us with. It's the names they will keep. Okay, so I decided at the end of the day not to bother trying to wrap the patch around. I'm just going to put another patch on the top. More patches is probably better anyway. Yeah, so this is what we've got so far. So I've pinned it in place. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and baste it into place so that we can remove the pins. So baste first. I'm going to baste it actually in from the edges, because what I'm going to have to decide, what I'm going to do is once I've got it basted in place, I'm going to do some more trimming. Once I know that I've basically thread glued it together, using thread to glue it, the two layers of linen together. And because this is on the bottom of my foot and it's a pretty thick linen, actually it's this fustian is pretty thick. I got it to make arming garments. So, but that's also, I'm using it on the sole. I'm going to actually do a blanket stitch to finish the edges. I'm not going to turn the edges under because I don't want to have that thick, like this thick ridge kind of running around the patch. So I'm going to actually use basting stitches to thread glue it in place in from the edge. And then any extra trimming I need to do, I'll do that. And then I'm going to blanket stitch the edges to the linen underneath of it to both finish the edges and secure it in place. So that's what I've decided right now. Blanket stitch for the win. Yes, Teeny. Yes, Teeny. What? Come on. You want to get up? Come on. This is Chimi. Yeah, this is the other of the two rescued babies. He wants me to give him other food than what he has. That's what you're witnessing here. This is his version of extortion. I'm kidding. He'll only leave me alone to continue the live stream if I give him the food that he wants versus the food that he has. And I think we all know. There it is. That kitties, they get super picky once they become house kitties. So we bought this amazing, delicious food from Costco. Grain-free, all natural, super short ingredient list, like exactly the thing a kitty should be eating, right? None of the crap cats shouldn't eat. Do these babies like that? They do not. But guess which babies do like it? The outdoor apartment kitties. So in Korea, there's a lot of stray cats, but thankfully people are taking care of them now. So like every apartment building kind of has its own apartment building cats. And our apartment building cats, they love the Costco grain-free and natural cat food. Love, love, love. If I put it out, it's gone in 10 minutes. You don't even see the apartment kitties there. It just vanishes. Right. My babies, they'll let it literally rot. You guys are spoiled. My goodness. So spoiled. You have forgotten what it was like to be out in the wild, I can tell. Welcome to my life. This is what it's like to be me. Oh, goodness, kitty. He's not normally a lap cat, by the way. There's a few moments of lap kitty. Apparently, live streaming is lap kitty time. Have I made a gambeson? I have made multiple gambesons. I have made multiple arming garments. So Kaylee, what era of gambeson are you looking to make? What era and geography? Have you settled on that yet? Because there are different kinds depending on your era. And also, what kind of armor will be going over top of it? Or will you be wearing the gambeson over top of your armor? We will probably never know, but I wonder how many of the higher nobles would have patches on their everyday clothes or underlayers that did not often show. Oh, we will know, Takeda. We do know. You know how we know? Because the extant garments we have nearly all have repairs and patches. And also in the expense accounts, often there are, like, for example, in the expense accounts of the Howard household, there are multiple entries for paying someone to make repairs to Lord Howard's gowns. And like usually it's en masse, like it's a bulk entry, right? So for certain, and it's literally, it says for making repairs too. And so they, their garments were absolutely, it's funny. Thank you, Takeda, for asking about that, because I've read that the other day and I wanted to share it with you all. Yes, absolutely. Even, I mean, Duke of Norfolk, right? Like royal peer, not a royal peer, but a peer of England in the late 15th century. Absolutely. His very fine gowns and garments were all sent for repairs on a regular basis. Hosen, gowns, doublets, jackets, in quotes, not what we think of as a jacket, but what they sent for repairs on a regular basis. And I'm confident that they tried, obviously, to make the repair as subtle as possible in the 15th century pronunciation of that word, but I'm confident that there were patches that were still to some extent visible. If you look at Charles de Blois' Pourpoint from the 1360s, you will see that there are repairs on it. There are patches, there are repairs, there are pieces of fabric, and some of them that were probably inserted to adjust for growing, for a change in size. So yeah, in Diego di Cavaniglia's Farsetto, there is a very clear indication of seams being let out, pieces being added in. Yeah. Oh yeah, everyone, if you're on a mobile device, if you double tap the screen, that will be the thumbs up. So yeah, definitely don't forget to hit that thumbs up, everybody. And subscribe if you would like to see more such content. Let me see. I'm looking for more Irish style 1450 and chainmail. I love the look of the chain, and it'll go under the chain. Right. So you're looking for the, yeah. Okay. I got you. Okay. So we actually have an extant garment that's very, very similar to that exact kind of garment you're talking about, from France. Another Charles is Charles the Seventh's coat, maybe. If you look up maybe early 15th century French gambeson red, you can probably find it. It's in super good shape. And so it's very, very similar to the kind you're talking about. They think this one was designed to go over the armor, but it has those long channels. It's so all the techniques would be the same, right? There's not going to be a difference in the assembly techniques. So basically, you're going to have multiple layers of fabric. You're going to have it, no doubt it was cotton wool, because that seems to be the choice, the padding of choice in this era in the 15th century is cotton wool. And you're going to, I would say that you're going to actually pad the garment out and then quilt it, rather than, say, quilting channels in and then stuffing padding into it. And your base layer is going to be linen or fustian. And then there probably will be, I think on Charles's, I think it might be Charles VI's, maybe King of France. Anyway, I think on that one there is an extant, there is an inner layer right? So you've got your lining, you've got your shell, and then there's an interlining. And the interlining against is there just as an extra layer. And I'm having now dealt with padded garments, making them this way. I think I know why. It's not just for extra strength and whatnot. Why there's an interlining layer between the shell. So you've got the shell, then there's your interlining, then there's your padding, and then there's your lining. And I'm pretty certain that the interlining is between the shell and the padding because the padding will eventually work its way out. It will actually come out. Like you'll start like hair growth. It will start growing through the gaps in the weave of your shell fabric from the violence of the process of being an arming garment. So yeah, that's what we learned on my condottiero's arming hosen that we made for him. So you're going to want a garment that is, there's a high likelihood. I haven't seen whether the Irish ones are buttoned or not because, or laced, because they're always shown depicted under the mail, you know. Um, but the one from France is fitted to the body, and so it has buttons so that you can button it and take it off. And I really think, honestly, a padded garment, that kind of padded garment, you're going to want to open it. You're not going to want to make it slip over your head because it's going to be so awkward, and you're going to want it to basically fit your body. So I'm pretty certain it's going to have buttons in the front, and you're going to want your buttonholes to be horizontal, not vertical. Not vertically, because then you're going to have these big holes that are going to pull open. Whereas if they're vertical, then the hole doesn't open with the strain of the button pulling through it. Let me see. I'm trying to think what else I can think about that particular garment. I think it's quilted. That one I think is quilted in silk thread. Sorry, Chimi. I'm busy, baby. I don't have time to pet you and live stream. That will be a Kitties of the Palace channel with me just sitting there petting the cats for 3 hours. Rebecca says, did you say I live in Korea? I am currently in Korea. Live is a really strong word. I am currently based there for the moment, shall we say. I'm kind of nomading it right now. But my base of operations is definitely is currently Korea. Yes. But live is a strong word. My life is complicated at the moment, shall we say. Yeah. Uh, Yeah, so Kaylee, so we're talking about I'm talking about a gambeson, which is a padded arming garment, and I don't think they call them that anymore by the 15th century. I think the language has moved on, but that's neither here nor there. In the general historical European martial arts world, a gambeson is a padded arming garment that provides a layer of protection between you and the outside world, and that's usually because they were worn under mail, not under plate. Once you start getting plate, they move away from these big, thick garments, and you have more fitted arming garments and mail, and you don't need the padding so much anymore. So yeah, I would definitely check out Charles's gamut. And there's tons of pictures of it all over Pinterest for certain. Definitely on Pinterest. Lots and lots of coverage. I would love to see a video on how the Contessa's condottiero shall be dressed and armed. Yes, we do plan to do a getting dressed video with him. And once his harness is done, which we've had on commission for 5 years, ridiculously, but once his harness is done, we will absolutely do a how the condottiero shall arm. Right now, his kit is a little hodgepodge, which is maybe okay for a random mercenary, but not for an actual condottiero. So we'll once we have the nice pretty kit, we will definitely be doing a how the condottiero shall arm video. I think that will be super informative to many people who have so many misconceptions about medieval armor. I mean, even people who are in organizations like the SCA have massive misconceptions about armor. My lady, I wouldn't leaf wield a banhammer in thy defense. Where did I get my collar? This collar is a replica of the Maria Portinari collar from several of her portraits, and it is made by Armor and Castings. It is not currently, you have to write them if you'd like if you'd like one of these. It's not currently on their website as like a thing you can buy or order, but you just email them, send them a message, and they will make one for you, because this is a make on demand instead of a keep in stock kind of item. It's, yeah, this is not an inexpensive item. This is cast and enameled. And every place where there's enameling, they have to hand paint the enamel on. So, casting is just step one of making a piece like this. Then the pieces have to be, in this case, electroplated with gold. And then they have to be, in the case of the roses, then they're enameled, and the inset is enameled. And then the gems have to be set by hand, right? So there's a lot of handwork that goes into this beyond just the casting phase. So I think this was $400, $500 US. But I can tell you, I've had this one for 3 years and it wears really, really well. Yeah, it also weighs a pound. So if you, at least a pound. So if you end up, traveling by plane and you need to remove some weight from your checked bags, just removing this will free you a pound, pound and a half. Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly not inexpensive. And this comes from this predates my collaboration with Armor and Casting, so we just bought this outright. This was a we bought it piece, not a we. It was not part of my sponsorship or anything like that. But yeah, I can tell you, it. The nice thing about it is because it's cast and not some kind of softer material, it holds its shape. Like, it stays in this shape. It doesn't hang down into a necklace kind of thing like certain collars actually do, medieval collars even. It holds this shape, and I don't have to pin it to anything to make it stay rounded like this. So yeah, I really love this thing. It's pretty awesome. Definitely one of my favorite accessories, and I have worn it with modern evening gowns because I have this really gorgeous custom made silk evening gown that's off the shoulders, and so there's just all this beautiful skin and bone that's exposed. So I put this collar on, and because the gown's red and there's red in this, it just matches really nicely. So, another way that items from your wardrobe, your medieval wardrobe, that items from your medieval kit can be also used in your modern life. There's no reason, I feel anyway, to segregate between my medieval and my modern things when my medieval things can be perfectly useful in my modern life. In fact, all of my glassware are replica 15th century blown glasses from old Hansa in Estonia. Um, so even our glassware that we use just every day for drinking out of for guests, it's replica medieval items. Let me see. I don't have as much experience as a mod as I do as a streamer, but I can at least keep the bots at bay. Oh yeah, Elena, if you would like to be a mod as well, that would be fantastic. Um, I will absolutely, if you're interested, trying to think how to message me with your your relevant channel. Or is that your channel? I just need to add you as a mod. I just need your channel, and then I can add you as a mod. That would be great. More mods are better. Yeah, no problem. I guess, yeah. So yeah, that's no problem. Twitch whisper. Are we getting problems over on Twitch? I haven't actually seen anything bad from Twitch. Are we getting issues? Are there issue commenters on Twitch? Oh, for goodness sakes. Okay, so I got talking and I forgot to wax my thread. And this is what happens when you forget to wax your thread. It knots. So yeah. Goodness gracious. Uh-oh. The kitty's made off with the wax again. So I'm going to show you some things that I find on the floor on a regular basis every morning. This is this is a upcycled or recycled saffron jar that I use to hold my lacing rings. Right, these really nice lacing rings that I use on my Italian gowns. Right, and every single morning, oh wow, the jar still smells like saffron. Yep, still smells like saffron. every morning, every morning, I find this jar not on the table where it sits. No, no, no. It is always on the floor and somewhere across the floor. So the kitties think this is a great toy. So apparently they've made off with my wax as well. Oh well, I just have to deal. Unfortunately, the wax might actually taste good to them. thank you, Drum. Appreciate that. So yeah, remember always, ladies and gentlemen, when you are hand sewing, use your wax. And if you don't have wax, get beeswax. And also, paraffin will not work. So you can't just use a so-called wax candle if the wax is paraffin. Paraffin does not work for waxing your thread. Trust me, I tried. That's not me being authentically snobbish. That's me having tried because I didn't have any beeswax and I was desperate. So yeah, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Paraffin is not anything like the same composition as beeswax is. So it is a substitute that is not feasible, not from an authenticity perspective, but from a what beeswax does perspective. Okay, so I have now finished basting, and I don't think it's white on white, so it's unlikely you'll be able to see my basting stitches, but maybe you can. And now that I've basted, now I remove my pins because Um, pins are good for initially holding things together, but you always want to remove your pins. You want to baste and then remove your pins because pins will warp things because they do create a little warping, where they actually go into and out of the fabric. And they will also stick you or fall out as you're sewing. So pin, then baste, and then do your final stitches. That's my process anyway. Let's see. I wonder if there's a pattern for sale that one might adjust to your own measurements. Oh, wait. Are we talking about uh, what a full gown would be a real dream? Oh, darn it. Oh, I love her dress too. I'd like to make one someday. Oh, okay. Talking about my kirtle? Sorry, I missed some comments. If you're talking about this kirtle, I'm planning on doing a paid kirtle workshop. Well, pay what you can kirtle workshop. I'm just figuring out the logistics of that because I've never done this via Zoom. It would be via Zoom, right? I've done it in person. um, and that's different. So we're going to do it via Zoom. It will be on my website, thecreativecontessa.com, or via my website, and it will be pay what you can. So, it is paid. This is literally what I do for a living, like teaching people to do things, but in these workshops and whatnot. But I understand that not everyone is in the same financial position, and I don't want creativity to be a privileged thing. So it will be a pay what you can option, which means whatever you feel is fair and you can afford safely and comfortably based on your level of income and whatnot. You just enter that amount into the tip. So keep your eye. I will make announcements once it's official. I've just got to think about the breakdown. It's probably going to be a 6 session thing because we'll go through we'll probably have to include like patterning, fitting the pattern. So that'll be part of the Kirtle workshop. And then, basic assembly will be part of it, going through it step by step. There'll be homework in between each session. So, please have by the next session, please have long seams sewn. And I'll show the hand sewing techniques, but you'll have the option, obviously, to use your sewing machine, at least for the inner seams. I don't use a sewing machine for the outer stuff. So I won't, if you want to learn how to use a sewing machine to do outer finishes, I'm not your girl. I'm not your woman. But yeah, so I'm pretty certain we're going to be doing this. I'm getting closer to a concept of, as I talk about it, especially with you all, I'm getting closer to the concept, the conceptualization, the practical implementation of it. So yeah, keep your eye on that. It's going to be an after Penzic thing. So it will probably be a September, October workshop situation. Yeah. And so there will be, basically probably 2 to 3 hours per session over 6 weeks is kind of what I'm thinking it's going to take. Because this is going to be the first one I've done in this format, you might have to accept that it might go longer depending on how it actually ends up going. But every session will be recorded, and I always share the recordings with the participants, and you have access to those for as long as the internet doesn't corrupt the files. Right. So yeah, we will be doing that. And a prerequisite for that is going to be, though, you need to have your own smock already. Whatever it is you're going to wear underneath, you need to have that because it will be fitted to go over top of that. And you don't want to make a kirtle that's not fitted to go over top of an under thing if you plan on wearing an under thing under the kirtle. Right. So that will be a prerequisite, is having some kind, whatever undergarment you plan on wearing, that you have one of those already made. Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is the Maria Portinari collar by Armor and Castings. You can absolutely, I know it sounds like me talking on the freaking red carpet. My gown by Chanel, my coif by the Contessa, right? But no, seriously, Armor and Castings. If you would like one, reach out to them about it. It's their Maria Portinari collar. It is a lovely piece. One of my most controversial pieces. Let's see. If I missed any questions of not just cheeky questions about me being sexy or whatever, but like questions that you actually want me to answer, please pop them in the chat again and I'll try to get to them. Because I'm sewing, and talking, I'm not able to necessarily keep up full speed with the with the chat, and I apologize for that. But I just have so much I want to share with you all. Okay, so now that I have, let me tell you what I'm doing. Now that I have affixed the patch with thread glue, as we call it, I am now going to do basically blankets stitches slash buttonhole stitches all the way around the edge. And I'm going to use double thread for that because I'm going to need the double thread for that. And that's going to basically catch all these raw edges. And that's going to also secure this to the original sole, as it were. But I'm also now going to, now that I've got it thread glued on, now I can see if there's any places where it needs to be cut, any places where it's too much maybe. So I can make that decision now. Yeah. Okay. It's called a whisper. Okay, Elena, thank you. Got it. I'll send you a DM on Twitch for after stream. Got it. Thank you. Perfect. Can confirm if the undergarment isn't fitted right, the kirtle won't fit either. I made that mistake. Yeah. And here's the other thing. If you want a gown over top of your kirtle, like you should if you want to go out into the world to do something other than be executed or farm a field, you need to have the kirtle so that you can fit the gown over top of that. Ask me how I know. It's one of the things I discuss in my medieval sewing mistakes videos, which I highly recommend if you haven't checked them out and you'd like to learn all the things you shouldn't do when making medieval clothes. Check out my medieval sewing mistakes series. There were 2 of them, and I did put out a supercut of them. I candidly show you some of my greatest errors. I have the original garments to prove it, and tell you, what I would do differently next time so that you don't make my mistakes. Learn from the graveyard of fabric that lies in my wake of creativity. Okay, so let's see. Just going to go ahead and double my thread now, because this is definitely going to take a lot of wear. This is the bottom of my foot. I don't envy the bottoms of my feet. It's probably not the happiest place to be in the universe, because I walk miles and miles and miles and miles a day. I dance miles and miles and miles a day. I work out, kickbox, all kinds of hit and strength workouts. So I'm confident that it sucks to be my feet. if if feet had sentience, mine would be cursing God for making them my feet. Okay, so and I have a tutorial on the buttonhole stitch. It's actually under the lacing. If you go to my lacing hole tutorial, the same stitch that you use for finishing the lacing holes. Something flew up my nose and now my nose itches. I'm not trying to pick my nose. I think some fluff of my hair. Actually, one of my little humidity ringlets got snorted up my nostril and it tickled. Ah! Oh goodness. Okay. If you go to my eyelet tutorial, I don't remember if I call it lacing tutorial or eyelet tutorial on my YouTube channel. You can I demonstrate what is in essence the buttonhole stitch in depth, up close, really neat and tidy, if you want to learn how to do that. Now I am going relatively deep on these stitches, and I'll show you what I mean in a moment once I have a couple. It's white on white, so you may or may not be able to see it, but we'll find out. And I would, if I had my condottiero here and he were able to read comments off to me, I would actually angle the camera down, but then I couldn't see you at all. I couldn't see the live chat in any way, shape, or form. So that is why I'm not angling the camera differently, because I presume you would like me to ask me questions, and I presume I would like to answer your questions. So, and basically what this stitch does is it locks, it kind of catches the raw edges, but in a flat way, so that I don't have to turn, yeah, so that I don't have to turn the edges under to finish it, which I don't want to do with this thick fabric, because it will create what I'm pretty certain will be an uncomfortable ridge under my foot. So these are things you should consider when you're making patches, when you're patching your garments. Couple of things to consider. Do you need to patch it? Can you just suture the hole shut? You can only suture the hole shut, honestly, if the fabric is still strong. The fabric that's left is still strong. Then you can, and the hole isn't too big, because if you have a really big hole that's worn away and then you suture it shut, unlike our skin, the fabric isn't really going to stretch, and it's not going to fill in. It's not going to regenerate. So you're going to create a tightening, a bunching up in your garment. So yeah, so suturing a hole shut only works if you have room to do so and the fabric itself is still relatively strong, relatively intact. It's not wearing away. If the fabric around the hole is wearing away, as the case with this patch, then what you're going to want to do is put a patch on, and you're going to want to, consider it like a skin graft. You're going to want to patch beyond the hole. You're going to want to patch over the thin areas, but also you're going to want to attach the patch ideally into areas that are still strong and intact, where the fabric is still holding together pretty well. That's where you're going to want to attach the patch, because if you try to attach the patching to fabric that is also weak and wearing away, then you're just going to end up with that's going to wear away even more quickly, because now you've put the strain of a patch on it. Right. So yeah, you want to try to fully encompass any weak areas with your patching. And then the question of whether you leave the edges raw and do a blanket stitch like this, or whether you turn the edges under and do a blind stitch, uh, which is what I would do if I had turned the edges under. That comes down to whether the patching fabric that you use will create a big thick ridge if you turn it under, and will it matter if it creates a big thick ridge if you turn it under. If you're using wool, you don't have to turn it under ever. Blanket stitch will be plenty, and if it's melt-in wool, you won't even need to do a blanket stitch because it's felted. It's fulled actually, and so the edges, it will not ravel. It just won't. And some of you were expecting, I wanted to just apologize once again that our medieval myth busting episode did not get to happen yesterday. Philip and I were super disappointed, but Philip from Irish Medieval History is in Okinawa, and it's an island, and he has the damnedest problems with internet, and his internet went down on Friday morning, and it hasn't come back up again, and it's not going to come back up until Monday, probably at the earliest. Okinawa is a wonderful, beautiful place. It's an island though, and it's a tropical island. And apparently, like pretty much every tropical island I've ever personally experienced, they have an islander mentality, which means there's no rush to get things done, because we will neither die of starvation nor exposure if we don't get it done today. And that's cool. You know what? There's a beauty to living life at that pace. But also, if your internet goes down and you have live streams planned on the weekend, it sucks. So that is why our medieval myth busting episode has been delayed 2 weeks, because Philip is he's a well-earned vacation that includes next weekend. So in 2 weeks, we will be addressing the myth of the medieval kilt. And we will be talking about the history of the kilt, what it actually was in the Middle Ages, or what people think was a kilt, what that thing actually was. and the evolution of the kilt through to the modern day, and also the so-called Irish saffron kilt. So we'll be talking in depth about the kilt throughout and basically to talk about the kilt, we're going to end up talking about Scottish clothing from the first millennium all the way through, right, to the evolution of the actual kilt, the actual evolution of the kilt. So we've got some good stuff for you, lots of primary source evidence. We're going to be looking at medieval art, such the little that has left because of the stupid Reformation iconoclasm in Scotland. Screw you, Reformationists. Anyway, so we're going to be looking at art. I'm going to be helping you learn to identify, to be able to look at historical art and develop an eye for what is actually happening versus using your modern interpretation to see something that's not there. And a lot of the reason people think that kilts predate the 18th century, which they don't, is because they're looking at, say, Pictish art and completely misinterpreting what they're seeing. So we're going to look at Pictish art, we're going to look at medieval art, and I'm going to help you learn to be able to see what's there instead of what you expect to be there. Learn how to do that. And we're going to talk about primary sources, expense accounts. We're going to talk about linguistic development. We're going to talk about, how words in one century definitely don't mean the same thing as the same word in earlier centuries. We've got a great episode planned for you. And we had planned to combine kilts and medieval underpants, but I'm getting the impression, based on the amount of information he and I both have to discuss, that we're going to probably have to break it up into two separate episodes of medieval myth busting. We'll do medieval underpants myth busting the week after, probably, and probably just kilt myth busting in that week. But that also allows us to really dig in deep. And I like getting into these topics in depth because there's so many details that need to be explored that are fascinating and that will, help us along our journey of exploring medieval and historical material culture. Let me see. Yeah, I turned the edges under on the long patch I'm sewing on the pavilion repair, not like it's going to chafe. Yeah, nope. It definitely shouldn't be chafing anyone. Takeda, if your pavilion is causing someone chafing, you might want to have them arrested. Because I don't even want to think about what they're doing with your pavilion. Yeah. So medieval underpants. Yeah, I promised that I was going to talk about this some today, though. I promised my patrons I was going to talk about this a little bit. Some of you may be following me also on Facebook. Some of you may be watching this live stream from Facebook, in fact. If you are, welcome. Thank you for watching. And my Facebook page has recently exploded. Facebook has decided finally that my content is worthy and interesting and deserving of push. And so I have gone from being an almost unknown medieval vlogger on Facebook to having massive reach, like insane reach for, my niche topic anyway, my niche field. And I published 2 days ago at this point, maybe 3 days ago at this point, I found an interesting piece of evidence, discussing a piece of 15th century English source that's a translation of a 14th century French source talking about women wearing underpants. And I published this, I actually published a picture of the 16th century printed edition in French of the 14th century French source, that the part that specifically mentions the braise, the breche, as they're called in 15th century English. And I mentioned it as a piece of evidence, for women and medieval women and underwear. And I realized that some people who don't know me might not understand that I don't talk in absolutes, like almost ever, and that I wasn't trying to make an absolute statement about this passage and it's as some kind of incontrovertible proof of women having worn underwear. I almost never mean that because as a historian, as an amateur historian, I don't believe in incontrovertible proof generally. There's some exceptions, but almost all proof can be interpreted from different lights, different perspectives, both equally valid. Yeah. this tale that I shared, I didn't share all of my thoughts about it, and I realized that there were a lot of things that I was thinking when I shared this post that I didn't actually include in the post. Anyway, it's very interesting that it is hands down my most viral post, like my non-video, just plain up post with a picture. I mean, it's been shared hundreds of times. It's comments out the wazoo. What's interesting is the people who are sharing it on their pages are getting all kinds of positive, productive conversation, encouraging, and oh, yeah, this is interesting. Well, here's what I found on mine. I'm getting all kinds of argumentative, in some cases, insulting comments. So it was just interesting to observe the difference in the audiences. I'm not certain if it's because mine is just now reaching new audiences and I haven't properly curated the assholes out yet. I don't know. Look, here's the deal, everyone. I'm a human. I make mistakes. I can interpret things incorrectly, and I can absolutely revise my interpretations. Historical dance, I've revised my interpretations of certain individual step units 3 or 4 times since I started studying historical dance 30 years ago, 35 years ago. What year is it? 30 years ago. Yeah, 30 years ago. So I have no problem admitting, yeah, I don't think I was right back then. I've changed my mind. Not a point of pride for me. So I have no problem engaging in productive, respectful, honest debate and discussion. I don't take kindly to being having aspersions cast upon my person. And I definitely I do not accept anyone who says, no, that's not true. It never happened that way. It couldn't have happened that way. What you're showing me is not evidence. It's not. Like, I really get the impression of someone stomping their feet and shaking their little fists like a little 3-year-old throwing a temper tantrum, right? I don't respond well to that at all. That is neither mature nor productive, nor is that how academic discourse should work. So yeah, some platforms have a higher rate of assholery than others. Yeah, but what's funny, Elena, is that, for instance, Rosalie Gilbert, Rosalie's Medieval Woman, I don't know if any of you know her. If you don't, check her page out. She's on Instagram. She's on Facebook. She's got a website. She is fantastic. She's been doing this longer than I have, I'm pretty certain. And she does 14th century, 13th, 14th century. So she's got all kinds of great stuff. And she shared my post because she is in the women wore underpants camp, or sometimes in some periods, in some places, women wore underpants camp. Not the always, none of us are saying that all women through the entire medieval period wore underpants. Medieval period's 1,000 years in a whole continent. That would be ridiculous to say that about any garment. And I mean that. Shoes might be the only thing you can claim, and even then in Ireland, it's questionable if they always wear shoes. So, she shared my post, and under her post, it's all positive. It's all people going, "Oh wow, this is interesting. Oh, here's some evidence I found." Right? No assholery. But over on my channel, there's like It's. I mean, hopefully, let me just say that my page could maybe use an enema. I don't know that post. As far as Twitch goes, it varies by category. Some topics are full of wholesome folks, others full of trolls. Not that there aren't some free range trolls. Yeah, there are definitely some free range trolls that I've picked up on for certain. I got accused of eisegesis of history, which is seeing what I want to see rather than what's there. But you know what? Anyone who thinks their natural bias and their natural understanding does not automatically inform their understanding of further evidence is kidding themselves. There is no one who is immune from the influence of bias. Sorry, it's impossible. Now, you can fight it. You can be talked out of it. You can talk your own way out of bias, right? But it's, everyone is going to interpret a historical source through their own biases. Always. That's literally how your brain is wired. Certain people are more capable at divorcing themselves from their own biases. I play devil's advocate with myself all the time. And ask my condottiero how often I play devil's advocate to him, even if I share the same opinion about the topic. I will automatically assume the opposite position. So I am perfectly capable of stepping back and looking at the evidence and considering all the angles. And I have in the case of medieval women and underpants. And the video essay I published on this is pretty pretty states pretty clearly, I always present the various aspects and potential interpretations of any given piece of evidence, right? So I always try to be as fair as possible in interpreting historical evidence. Curation of a lovely community takes time. Ban first, ask questions later was my strategy. Did I miss out on some potential community members? Probably, but I have saved myself the headache of teaching. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, oh, stop that. No bad, no biscuit. Okay, there we go. Hi Pro. Why? Why? I restream. You need to make this less hard on a mobile device. Okay. So as to the post in question, I have now posted today what I'm calling incendiary bomb number 2 on my Facebook page. I was going to publish it on my YouTube community page as well, but my Patron and everything. I just didn't have time to get to all those things before the live stream. So I published it on my Facebook page, and I will be publishing it in all the other places as well. Just right now, it's only on Facebook. What I did today was I took screenshots of the original 15th century translation of this 14th century French morality tale. William Caxton, a very famous 15th century English publisher. I think he's the first printer in England, actually, I think. Uh, I might be wrong, but I think he might be the first printer in England. And he publishes he translates too. He does translations of a lot of continental texts and translates them into English and then prints them and publishes them in England. Anyway, he does a translation of this 14th century collection of morality tales that's called referred to as the Knight of the Tower. And it's basically a collection of cautionary tales intended to teach his daughters how to not comport themselves and how to comport themselves in the royal court of France, because they're going to Paris to join the queen's entourage. And so he wants them to be prepared and well armed against the evils, the corruption that is the French court, right? That he suspects the French court of being. And so it's a pretty long work, actually. He writes it in a 1371 to 1372, I think it's dated to. And so, morality tales are fantastic for giving you a glimpse into daily life in the Middle Ages, because morality tales aren't the pretty, beautiful romances, right? They're not the pretty people. Morality tales nearly always involve the common people, the little people, right? As to translate le petit peuple, right? The little people. And so, you can get a pretty raw idea of what medieval life was like by reading a lot of these morality tales. Boccaccio's Decameron, similar, right? They're folk tales, but a lot of them are morality tales. So I screenshot it because, links get throttled on Facebook, right? So I screenshotted and it's like 200 pages. So I screenshotted the relevant, just this story, just this tale, and I shared the original 15th century transcribed English. So you're welcome. You don't have to read 15th century printed print, which is not very different from 15th century calligraphy. And I shared that so that people can make their own decisions about what this tale says about women and wearing underpants. I have been thinking about it really hard and talking about it with various members of my house, my condottiero, my ladies, my damsels, my apprentices, etc. And the story, actually, the more I thought about it, beyond my initial reaction, the more questions I had. Because if you all want to go, if you go, I recommend you all go and read the story. It's only like 3 pages long. It's not long. It's really short, right? You usually don't need a lot of exposition to convey a moral story, the moral of the story, rather. So, the more I started thinking about it, I'm like, this story, does it mean that not even men of a middle class type wear breeches, wear underpants? Because in the story, basically what happens is this woman is a beautiful woman. She's the roper's wife, the cord maker's wife, but in 15th century English called a roper. Who would have known the name roper, like from the show Three's a Company? Roper was the name of the 15th century name for the profession for people who made rope. cord makers. And so the roper is married to an attractive, it's the usual trope. He's married to this very attractive young woman. And apparently the prior sees her in church during mass and he develops an affection for her. Affection. And the prior approaches her godmother. At least I think it's her godmother because God Siva is supposed to be God relative. I'm assuming it must be her godmother, and tells the godmother that if you arrange a liaison with this woman, I will pay you, basically, I will pay you in jewels to arrange a liaison with this woman. And of course, the godmother being, she's referred to as a bawd in the 15th century English. So she, of course, agrees because, money's money. And her goddaughter, well, maybe her goddaughter will enjoy having this affair with this prior who is well heeled. And the goddaughter apparently readily agrees. No, no pushback from her, for which she also gets jewels and whatnot, by the way. And apparently, as goes the story, one night, and this is where you really once really starts to question exactly what life was like, private life was like in the Middle Ages, because the situation I'm about to describe you occurs in multiple of Boccaccio's tales in Il Decamerone. So one night, the prior visits the wife, the roper's wife. By the way, the roper is just called the roper, and the wife is called the roper's wife or the goddaughter. Neither of them have names. So it's not just that she wasn't given a name. None of them are given names. And apparently, while the husband is sleeping, and apparently while they are sharing the same bed, apparently, based on the description, the prior comes in, sneaks in. They have their relations, apparently without the roper waking up. And then as the prior is leaving, apparently in the fireplace, in the hearth, the wood, the fire that had probably been curfewed maybe for the night, but wasn't completely curfewed, like it had died down, it sparked like lightning in such a way that it made a noise and it cast light, and that startled the husband, the roper, and he wakes up and he sees this dark, shadowy figure. And, for one, this should kind of tell you how dark the medieval world was, because, it's so dark that probably the roper wouldn't have seen anything if it had not been for, the sparking. But two, that spark is the light. That was the light. The light, that was it. There is no ambient light from something else, from street lights. No street lights in 14th century France. As far as I can tell, maybe in Paris, but probably not in any other city, and not going to be very bright. And there'll be, torches, not lights. So the husband startles and he says, "Oh my goodness, wife, who is that? What is that I see before me?" And of course she said, "I don't know. I wist not," she says in 15th century English. And so then the wife, of course, goes to her godmother and says, "Oh no, we're going to be discovered. This happened. My husband saw the prior. I'm trying to convince him I don't know what it was, but this could be bad. This could mean the end of our, I can't meet with him again, right? This is too dangerous." So the godmother is wily and savvy, and she comes up with a plan to gaslight the husband. It's a morality tale. These are not supposed to be good people. You should not sympathize with these people. You should not think, wow, that's a good person. So just remember that when I tell you what she does to him. So she, what the godmother does is she sits outside. Apparently they're neighbors. They must live close by. She sits outside of her home spinning, and she starts off by spinning black wool. First off, I thought it's very interesting that this is an indication of, something that a woman can do professionally and casually from kind of anywhere, spinning. So she's got her distaff, she has her drop spindle, and she's spinning black wool. And the husband, the roper, exits the home to go and, go to the marketplace, run an errand or something. Specifics don't really matter, but he sees her spinning and they engage in a conversation. And she talks about how she's spinning black wool. Okay, great. He comes back. Before he can come back home, she switches the spindle and the distaff for white wool. And then when he comes by, He comments, "Well, now you're spinning white wool. You were spinning black wool before." And she said, "Sir, I've never spun black wool. It's been white wool this whole time." And he goes away. Okay. And he goes away and she switches back to black. And so when he comes by a third time and comments, "But weren't you spinning white wool?" She says, "Sir, absolutely not. This is the second time you have mistaken the color that I've been spinning. Clearly, there's something wrong with your head." And she convinces him that, he's not seeing things correctly, he's not perceiving things correctly, he's imagining things. And she brings up then the incident with the wife about seeing the dark shadow, saying, "Your wife mentioned that you saw something strange the other night. I think it's just your mind playing tricks on you." And she convinces him of that. Like, she completely gaslights him into believing that. Of course, the wife backs up the godmother on this. "Oh, yes, it must have been in your head." So relations resume with the prior. And then after one morning, the roper gets up, and this is where I had to learn a new 15th century English word. A polka is a word for a little pouch. It's a 15th century English word for pouch, probably a corruption of the French pouche, or maybe an earlier Germanic word. Uh, you know, so that maybe came over with the Normans. Norman French being more Germanic than French French. Anyway, he grabs what he thinks is a pukka, which is a little pouch that he finds at the foot of the bed, little linen pouch. And he's apparently going to go catch fish. And I found out that the pukka, because I looked it up in the Middle English Dictionary, there's an online Middle English Dictionary run by the University of Michigan. It's fan-freaking-tastic. Highly recommend. Fantastic place to research medieval material culture. And apparently a pukka was also the pouch, basically, of a fish trap. So, fish trap would be made of basket, and it's made in a specific way. And then at the end, there would be a pouch, and that's the fish would get caught in the pouch, basically. And so apparently the roper gets up to go and catch some fish, and he goes to set the trap to catch the fish. And he discovers that the polka that he thought he had is actually a pair of breche, breeches. Which is the 15th century English word for the undergarment that you wear with which you gird your loins. And so, and so he gets very sorrowful. Apparently, he gets immediately sorrowful because he thinks his wife is cheating on him. Okay, so there's my first question right there. Why is he sad that he found a pair of breeches, or he has a pair of breeches? He's a man. Does he not wear breeches? Is he not wearing breeches now? Does he only have one pair of breeches? Like, those are the three options. He suspects there's someone else's because A, he does not wear breeches in general. So he doesn't own any. So how could he have found one at the foot of his bed? Two, he does wear breeches, but he only has one pair. So he doesn't know where this pair came from. And there was a third option and I forget what it was. Darn it. But anyway, those are the two options I can think of offhand, right? Either he doesn't wear them at all, and so where did these breeches come from? And he doesn't know whether his wife does or not. Or two, he only has one pair and he's wearing them. So what's the superfluous pair from? Okay. So then you could say, well, then that's evidence that women didn't wear underpants, didn't wear breeches, because, he would have just thought, oh, I must have grabbed my wife's breeches. Okay. Maybe there's another option here, though. The other option is that, and this is very likely considering the difference in the shapes of our bodies, that women's breeches in the 14th century and or 15th century are different than men's breeches in the 15th century. And so maybe what he's holding in his hands were very clearly a pair of male breeches. And so he's sad because here's this unidentified pair of male breeches. Right. And this is borne out. And the reason why I'm leaning more and more towards that interpretation is that in the 14th century French Latin dictionary slash encyclopedia called the Catholicon, well, there's multiple Catholicons, but this Catholicon is a 14th century French Latin dictionary, original to the 14th century. There is an entry. I believe the word in Latin, 14th century Latin, is femoralis. The French definition of the word femoralis is bras de femme, women's braids. Why would you have an entry in a dictionary for a word that has a specific meaning if it's not a real thing? You don't have words for imaginary things. Like, I don't think they're going to waste parchment. They're going to waste vellum and ink and time defining a word that isn't relevant to society at the time. So there was someone in my Facebook who commented something along the lines of, I'll only believe it if I see it in a probate will. Do you apply that standard to everything? All medieval material culture? You only believe it's real if it makes an appearance in a probate will, or just medieval women's underpants? Oh, Caroline, thank you. Ooh, those are my scissors. I think they just made a divot in the floor. Oops. Caroline, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. The priest would have fancy breeches. Okay, yes. So Lilybug. So that I had that thought too. Would the priest have fancy breeches? So we have no evidence of that in the documentary evidence from the 14th century, the prior having fancy breeches. I found no evidence of them being made of silk. I found no evidence of embroidered breeches or any kind of special separate cut. I don't have evidence of that. But also, if they'd been fancy breeches, I thought about that. If they'd been fancy breeches, would he have thought they would make a good polka for a fish trap? I don't think so. If they'd been obviously fancy, I think he would have noticed when he picked them up to grab them that there weren't the usual polka fabric, right? Because that's going to be linen. That's going to be maybe hemp, depending on which part of France. The Northern Europe has a a, a prejudice against hemp in the Middle Ages, not Southern Europe. Anyway, I thought about that, but I think he would have noticed because he wanted something that would work as a fish trap. And I think that fancy breeches they'd have to be fancy enough to be obviously not fish trap material, is my thinking behind that. But that's just my thinking, right? Again, lots of things here, lots of open questions here. Right. So then let's get to the rest of the tale. The rest of so then the wife realizes somehow, before he even comes home, she realizes that the prior has left his breeches and that her husband has taken the breeches. Problem. Okay, so she goes again to her bod of a godmother, her Godsib, and tells her what's happened. And the Godsib says, God, I've got to save your ass a second time. She actually says that. And the Godsib says, no problem. Here, we'll take these breeches. I'll wear a pair and you wear a pair. And then we'll show your husband that we're both wearing breeches and that we're doing it to protect our chastity so that we don't get mistaken for bawds and prostitutes or get taken as prostitutes. Okay, so there's a lot of things to unpack there. So other people have, some people have looked at it and said, well, it's clear evidence that women didn't because they're taking them and wearing them just to make a point. Okay, but how did they just happen to have pairs of breeches on hand? This isn't the 21st century. You can't just go to your 24-hour Walmart and buy, extra pairs of linen breeches. Also, expensive. Garments are expensive, right? Fabric is expensive. Even linen breeches would not have been a discardable, disposable item. So they just happen to have some pair on hand that fit them well enough. It's not even the fitting part. Forget the fitting part, but just happen to have some pairs on hand when just one extra pair triggers the husband. So yeah. So it seems, those are the points where I go. So it seems to me that also that it's literally the Godsib's first idea. Her first idea to remedy the situation is we'll just wear them and show him that we're wearing them, and it's done. And then the husband's reaction is not one of shock or scandal or surprise. He's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It quells the matter entirely. So if that had been so unusual, I feel like the husband should have reacted differently or would have reacted differently. Also, if it had been so unusual, why would that have been the godmother's go-to solution? Now, does this mean that the wife in question always wears them? No, and I don't mean to say that. but maybe the godmother does. And so she has pair. And so she's saying, here, we'll both wear them. We'll show them that we're both wearing them and we're good to go. Maybe they only wear them some of the time, right? But I just feel like if it had been something that's never done, that it wouldn't have been such an easy plot point in this story. If they were fancy breeches, he would have sold them. Yeah. Anyway, and there's some other things, other holes that the tale, creates, other questions that the tale opens up. And again, I'm not saying that this is absent of any other evidence, proof positive that women wore breeches in the 14th century in France, or that they always did. But I'm pretty certain it's indicative that some of them did some of the time, and that they must have had breeches in their possession to be able to just pop them on. Oh, thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, 13 as 13. Thank you. That's super generous of you. Thank you. Really appreciate you. For those who don't know, he just just tipped me via super chat. Really appreciate you. Thank you. So yeah, those are my current thoughts on that story. But I'm not taking that story in isolation. I have lots and lots of other evidence of women in various times and places owning and or wearing underpants. Right? So for instance, and if you want to see a more concise, witty version of the medieval underpants evidence for and against, I have a really great video. I like the video, actually. I think it's a good video on my YouTube channel. Medieval women underpants. If you look it up, you'll find it. And in that video, I also discuss the art, right? And, you all have heard this before, and I'll say it again. Art is dangerous, and not for the reasons that certain religious institutions claim it is. It's dangerous because it can be easily misinterpreted. Art, especially historic art, and medieval in particular, needs to be taken in its context. And so, just because, read your comment. Oh, hold on a minute. Sorry. Wait. Maybe the point of the morality tale was to tell his daughters, you always wear your breeches, which would indicate that he's expecting them to wear breeches. That's an interesting. So my condottiero says maybe the point of the morality tale was to tell his daughters to wear your breeches, which would indicate that he's expecting them to wear breeches. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the godmother does say, "Well, tell him we're doing this so that we appear as chaste women," right? So that also kind of violates that idea that it was only prostitutes who were wearing breeches. Like some people, that's a myth that goes around. Yeah, good point, condottiero. Good point. Sorry, I missed it. Yeah. So, you have to look at art in its context. You have to consider what it is the art is depicting. You have to consider when it's being depicted. You have to consider sometimes even what the contemporary political situation in which the artist existed was in order to impact that art. So, just because you see a visual depiction of a woman in breeches, in underpants, is not, I would never ever say that is evidence of women having worn underpants. Never. Not automatically. Have to take it in its context. And I discussed that in the first part of my video on medieval women's underpants. I definitely am not pulling art out of context. And that's also one of the piece doing so, though, is another thing that has led me to believe, in combination with other evidence, for instance, the Catholicon that actually defines a specific Latin word as female underpants, right? To distinguish them from male underpants. So I'm taking everything into consideration, right? That is why I think that in this art that depicts women putting on the pants, putting on the underpants, right? The men's underpants. She's putting on the man's underpants, not just underpants. It's ones that are very specifically look like men's underpants, because especially it's pretty much only from the 15th century. I think I've seen this imagery. The underpants they're putting on, every time I've seen it anyway, it's got the pouch for the dangly bits. It's got the dangly bit pouch, right? That is a part that I'm pretty certain would not have been included in female underpants, female braids, and especially for the fitted version of the 15th century when they do get fitted. They all have those pouchy bits, right? The polka. Oh, maybe that's a play on words. I didn't think about that. In the Caxton story version of the story, where he grabs a polka and it turns out to be breaka, but the breaka of the 15th century are like the fitted kind that have the pouch for the pouchy bits, for the dangly bits. I wonder if that's a funny. I wonder if Caxton picked that specifically as a play on words. That would be pretty fun, wouldn't it? Anyway, so that's why I think the art is depicting women putting on pants, not as a sign that women didn't, and therefore her putting it on is the unnatural thing. No, no, no. She's putting on her husband's underpants, which are different from hers, is my theory. Oh, thank you, Azra. Really appreciate that. That made you. Oh, Ryan, Condottiere, are you talking about how which part made you flip your interpretation? Also, if you're driving, don't answer that. Well, we know medieval stories were sometimes both funny and naughty, right? God knows, man. Boccaccio and Chaucer, who were contemporaries, by the way, and there's theories that Chaucer actually met Boccaccio. Um, their stories are just smut, like 90% smut, right? It's there is very little wholesome about, and that's why when Chaucer is taught in high school, they really are not teaching it the right way. They need to start off with the Miller's Tale. That's where they should start. Forget the prologue. Definitely don't go to A Knight's Tale, because they're not going to understand the satire that A Knight's Tale is. Start with the Miller's Tale. That's where you should start your Chaucer with your high school students. Then you get instant buy-in. Like, seriously. Um, oh my God. So yeah, that's some of the latest evidence. Oh, and then a new piece of underpants evidence that has come to light. And this one is pretty, yeah, relatively definitive. You had a good teacher, Elena. Good for you. This piece of evidence is in my very uh hedged world somewhat definitive. So there is some of you may be familiar with fabliaux. These are basically like French folk tales. They tend to be bawdy, they tend to be naughty, and they date back to the 12th century, and then there's kind of additions going forward. So there is a fabliau I was just introduced to, and I haven't had a chance to go back and read the whole tale yet. But the excerpt that I saw in the original medieval French, Middle French, so I think it's 13th century French based on how hard it was for me to understand. The 13th century French, it's a scene where a man and a woman are having an affair. It's lots of adultery. Medieval people were obsessed with adultery. So they're having this adulterous affair. And did you just call me old? Okay, that's interesting. I definitely don't think of myself as old. Um, the older the berry, the sweeter the juice. Goodness gracious. Jesus. Anyway, so in this tale, there are people who are two people are about to get it on, and the tale, the man actually, the author takes the time to describe the removal of her brace. He actually says he lifts up her chemise, her smock, and then he had to remove her, and it's a funny word for my French speakers out there. The 13th century French term for this nether garment that this woman is wearing is a coiffe de col, in the 13th century French. Not col, because it's 13th century French, so it's kind of Provençal stuff. Anyway, oh, okay, well, that's cool. Wilbur, I'll take that. I definitely don't feel old, and I have the energy of a 12-year-old, so. Anyway, I appreciate you saying I'm beautiful in any case. So yeah, so this tale, this 13th century fabliau, specifically says the knight he lifts up her shirt, and then he has to remove her coiffe de col, which could be translated roughly as her butt coif. in the most absurd most absurd way possible, aka thong. Wilbur, let me just say that you might not be as far off the mark as you think you are. Yeah, her her butt quake. But it could col I think is probably like more referring to more generally the nether regions, not just the buttocks, but in 13th century French probably implies like that whole area from front to back kind of thing. But that's the first time I've ever seen the word coif used in that context, in the context of anything other than the head. So I went and checked out in the Middle French dictionary that's online, another great resource for material medieval research. And apparently in a medieval context in French, the word coif could be used to just mean a general covering. And then I thought about it. Well, I mean, it makes sense that if it's a rounded shape that covers your head, your nether region from front to back is also rounded. So why not? Right. I mean, thongs don't really cover the butt very much. Yeah. The nethers. Right. So it seems it, yeah. In any case, she's got something that's covering all the relevant bits and it has to be removed for them to engage in their intended project. So I'm pretty certain that's an indication of at least one woman having worn them. And again, in the tale, the man is not surprised to find it. He just has to do it. It's something he has to do. So, yeah, I want to read the whole story and see what else it might have to say about that. Maybe there's some mention of it earlier in the story. I don't know. But that's my latest piece of it's my latest mini underpants rabbit hole that I'm going to have to chase down. But that wouldn't be the first time in French that's mentioned. That a woman wearing braids, wearing breeches is somehow indicative of or inhibitive to sexual intercourse. There are assault cases, and I'm just going to leave it at that. And I think we all know what kind of assault I'm talking about. There are assault cases from, for example, 14th century France that have some pretty disturbing details. But amongst those details are always, in any of these assault cases, one of the key pieces of information that's standard across all of them is that clothing is ripped and torn and bloodied, usually. And one of the key pieces of clothing that apparently needs to be removed forcibly for it to count as assault is bray, is breeches in English. And it comes up also in a fabliau, Renard, uh, Renard, Renaud le Renard, where this fox named Renaud, apparently forces his affections, in quotes, upon, by the way, they're all animals in this fabliau. He forces his affections upon a lady, one of the wives of a fellow courtier, and apparently he claims that he did not have to remove her braids forcibly. She removed them for him. So again, this is like a sign that she's wearing them and she removed them, and that them being removed not forcibly must be a sign that the exchange is consensual. So, there's plenty of textual evidence. You just have to find it. And again, none of us who are in the women underpants yes camp, none of us, at least no one I know, is going to claim, yes, every woman through 1,000 years of Western European history wore underpants across the entire continent. No, no one is saying that. No one would dare say that. Only a fool would maintain such a thing. But there's so much documentary evidence of it. And, the more I dig, the more I find. And for me, it's the parallel is bust support, breast support for an actually shaped garment whose almost sole function is bust support, right? So for decades in living history communities, the common wisdom was that women never wore anything like a bra before the modern era, with the exception of ancient Rome, where they apparently wore them at spas, at bathhouses to work out, right? God, the word, if any of you know the Latin word for the workout bikini, I forget what it's called offhand, but there's a word for that leather workout bikini that's depicted on the walls in Pompeii, for instance. Anyway, so the common wisdom was, the inherited wisdom was that there were never any support garments for women. Support was only attained through the gowns themselves, the outer gowns. Okay, or even the kirtle, right? This kirtle. Great. Okay, sure. Then they start renovating Castle Schloss Langberg in Austria, and they open up the walls and the floors and the ceilings, and they find all of these extant garments, all of these remnants of extant garments from the Middle Ages. And they find lots of linen, they find undershirts, and they find hats, different kinds of headwear, and they find some wool dresses, and they find linings for dresses. And lo and behold, they find something that looks all the world like a long line bra, complete with sewn in and shaped cups, complete with a sprang lace inset between the cups, long line bra, 100%. And suddenly, people start doing other kinds of research. They start looking through the textual evidence. People start reading expense accounts and inventories. They start reading literature. They start reading surgical records. And suddenly they start finding documentary evidence of breast support, right? And German, the word is Brustsacke, maybe breast sack, breast bag, right? They start finding evidence of it. They start finding evidence of women having breast reductions, by the way, in the 14th century. Ouch. So then suddenly we start seeing visual evidence of it. Suddenly we see it everywhere. Suddenly they're finding statues with women wearing what they find is not a long line bra. It's actually a smock, a smock with breast support built into it. Right. And suddenly then we're seeing it all over Germany and Northern Italy in the 14th century. We see it in the Wenceslas Bible, right? Suddenly we see it everywhere because now we have this extant piece. So, my opinion, my understanding, the way history is that something doesn't exist until someone finds evidence that it does. And generally, for most things that are kind of common and practical and easy to accomplish using medieval technology, eventually we will find evidence of it. It's just a question of time. So, for people to say well, there is no evidence of it, but we keep finding more, and people keep finding ways to claim, well, that evidence isn't true, but yeah, it's almost to the point of, bonjour, Kukazer, comment ça va? Ça va bien? Ouais? Il fait chaud ici, très chaud. Yeah. Let me see. Wait, sorry. Comment here. And of course, we know that under threat of further injury or worse, one could be compelled to remove an item of clothing. Yeah, sorry, I missed that, Elena. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, there are many ways to compel a person to do things without actually being violent with them, right? And then it's still assault. Yep. Anyway, so there is, just like with the built-in bus support, the more I look into it, the more evidence I find of women in various places having worn underpants. And never, ever, ever do I use the visual record for that, by the way. Never. I'm basing it solely on textual evidence. The only piece There are two pieces of visual evidence that I found that I could possibly consider as evidence of real women having worn underpants. And one of them definitely is evidence of women having worn underpants. One of them, and I present this evidence in my video, my proper vlog. And when I do my live stream chat on medieval women's underpants, you'll get to see it there as well. There is a famous fountain of youth scene from Northern Italy from the early 15th century. And in any fountain of youth scene, on one side of the fountain, you have the old folks shedding their clothing. And so they're in different states of undress. So it's also a great way to see what kind of layers go into a medieval outfit. Fountain of youth scenes, great for fashion historians because they're depicting real people. They're not depicting fantasy people. Nearly always it's real people, contemporaries. And you get to see all the layers from the skin out, right? And sometimes you get to see the garments piled on the ground. So you can actually see the structure of the garments, or rather the not structure of the garments, which tells you, what things were not structured maybe in the Middle Ages that we sometimes think are, like pleats. And then you see them in the fountain, and as you move, usually right across the fountain, they get younger and younger until they're fully restored, and then they're just all naked and happy and young. So, in this Italian depiction of a fountain of youth, there is a woman who is still wearing a smock, and her smock is translucent, a camicia. Her camicia is translucent, and you can see the shape of her body through it, and you can see very clearly she is wearing a pair of braids. Mudande. She's absolutely wearing mudande. 100%. They're clear as day. Easy to see. And if you apply gamma correction to the picture, it becomes even clearer because like it's a fresco, so it's a little worn out. But so some people claim, well, yes, okay, so women did wear underpants when they became incontinent from years of childbearing, which would probably have torn them up pretty badly. And so, many old women were therefore incontinent, and therefore, as a sign, because they were incontinent, then they would wear underpants. Okay, maybe. But find me documentary evidence talking about how women, don't wear underpants in their youth, but they do wear them once they reach their elder years and can no longer control their bowels. Right. I haven't seen that evidence. And I think I just feel like that would have been mentioned somewhere if that was in fact the case. Right. Those kind of things get mentioned in the oddest places. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Où est-ce qu'il fait pas chaud? euh, 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 Au Corée du Sud. Je suis en Corée. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up and like and all that other jazz. Yeah. Yeah. For those of you who are watching from a mobile device, don't forget you can just double tap the screen if you are enjoying. And as always, I just want to thank my patrons and my channel members and all of you who, contribute through the super chat. I really appreciate your very direct financial support of my work because, I really do put full-time effort into all of this research and recreation stuff. So I really appreciate your generosity. And if you are a channel member or if you are not and you're thinking about it, all kinds of extra perks that I give to my channel members and my patrons, for instance, all kinds of extra resources, my research resources, when I find them, I share them with my patrons and channel members. So all of these websites I'm mentioning, all of these primary sources, I share them with my patrons and channel members always. Also for my patrons and channel members, we're doing live Zoom sessions so we can actually talk and interact together. And you can show me what you're working on. I can give you advice. That's a monthly thing I do with my patrons and channel members. Sometimes more often if I can fit it into my schedule based on relative to where my patrons and channel members actually are in the world. So yeah, lots of extra perks, extra tutorials, extra video, unedited video. You can watch getting dressed video where it's literally just me and my damsels talking and chatting and being smarmy and smartassed. Unedited, 100% of the full getting dressed process from beginning to end in real time, for instance. Yeah, so lots of benefits to being a channel member or a patron. But of course, I also appreciate all the rest of you who've become part of my greater community. You're joining me every week for these, sometimes multiple times a week. You're leaving comments. You're asking me great questions in the comments. And I really appreciate you sharing your time with me, just even in that manner. Whatever way you support me, I appreciate it. Bonjour du Québec. Ah, c'est comme sujet. Thank you. Merci bien. Oh, Susan, I'm sorry. It's okay. We're actually getting to the end. Susan, if you want to wait, we're getting to the last 15 minutes anyway. So book corner time, everybody. Book corner time. Okay. So I've got some good books for you today, everyone. So a lot of you have been asking me about Korean books. I'll get to those. I'm going to start off with this one of these things is not like the other. So A History of Private Life by Philippe Arié and Georges Duby. And I'm assuming this was probably originally composed in French and then translated in English, but that's just me assuming. History of Private Life. It's fantastic. If you want to understand about how people actually lived in various places and times in medieval Europe. For example, there's a chapter on the Aristic households of feudal France. And it actually provides a layout of the average French castle, French donjon in this era, how the rooms would have been arranged, right? So you can actually see the kinds of spaces, like here's a layout. Right. So you can actually understand the spaces that people inhabited in their private. Oh, that's the Abbey of Cluny, but there's a castle layout in here too somewhere. They talk about Tuscan nobles on the eve of the Renaissance, how they lived their private lives. There's exploring literature, how private life is explained and depicted in literature, civilizing the fortress, going from fortress to manor houses. All kinds of the peasant hearth to papal palace, the 14th and the 15th centuries, lots of really great, interesting, and it's written in a very interesting way. So it's engaging, lots of primary sources. The only problem I have with it is that there's no footnotes. I hate it. I hate it when a good history text does not provide footnotes, but there's a lot of great imagery. History of Private Life, Interlibrary Loan for the win. If you like it enough, then maybe you can buy it, right? History of Private Life. Okay, so to the Korean history stuff. So a lot of you have been asking me for resources on medieval Korean history, and I've got some good ones for you here. Okay, so this one is a really great one, and I don't know if you'll even be able to get this outside of Korea. King Sejong the Great, the everlasting light of Korea. So if you don't know about Sejong the Great, check him out, look him up. He was I keep saying, where is our Sejong these days? Where is our Sejong? The world needs a Sejong. Sejong was a real philosopher king. He really deserves the term moniker. And he has the term moniker from the way we would think of someone as being great, not the medieval great, which means they did great and terrible things, right? That's Alexander the Great, by the way. Sejong the Great was an amazing inventor and engineer. He was a philosopher. He was a poet. He was a writer. And he reformed Joseon, right? He's one of the early Joseon kings. And his social reforms were absolutely advanced. Paid maternity leave and paternity leave for civil servants in the 15th century. Women's rights. Literacy. He's the one who invented the Korean alphabet so that his people could read, so that not just the aristocrats, not just the elite could control everything, but so that his people could actually take part in the government, in their own, knowing their own rights. Sejong was a really great man. So it's not thick, as you can see, and it contains some of his sayings. He had all sorts of really great sayings. It's got all sorts of primary source quotes taken straight from the royal annals. So you're reading translated primary source material in this book. So window into 15th century Korea, which was the greatest century for Korea, as far as I can tell. One of the great centuries for Korea was during Sejong's life, right? Okay, King Sejong the Great. I don't know if you'll even be able to get this in the US, but if you can, highly recommend. Then we have, this is for my people who are interested in exploring art in the Joseon era. Pathways to, oh, damn, I need to remember to mirror this thing. Pathways to Korean culture, right? And this is paintings of the Joseon dynasty from 1392 to 1910. So obviously the later part is maybe less interesting to us. But for instance, one of the chapters is women as artists and patrons. So it's not just looking at the art, but it's looking at the context of art in the Joseon dynasty, starting at the end of the 14th century and moving forward. So, they've got, just look at some of this art that they've got in this book, just gorgeous stuff. So very different, entirely different from European art. This will be for those of you who are familiar with European art, medieval European art, Renaissance European art, this is going to be nothing like that. So it's really going to blow your mind. So if you want to expand your art history horizons and your cultural history horizons to literally the other side of the Eurasian continent, can highly recommend, right? It's just, this book is beautiful, very informative. Pathways to Korean culture. Pathways to Korean culture. Okay. Then we have here, for those of you who want a history of Korea, medieval history of Korea, a history of Korea by Roger Tennant. And this starts all the way back in, the earliest earliest documentable civilizations, and then takes off with the Three Kingdoms period and the Gaia Kingdom, goes up through Sheila, explains all the interactions between, what is now modern day China and Japan and Korea. And there's a lot of primary source quotes in here. So they're taking, whoever did this went back and looked at the annals. And for those who don't know, Korea has a really rich textual history, dating primary source history, chronicles dating back pretty darn far. So, this is, it provides things, you can actually read excerpts from the actual annals to really get, an idea of history in the voice of the people who wrote it. Granted, the spelling is unfortunately the old romanization, so it can give you a headache to read a little bit. But if you really want a history to understand medieval Korea, then I can really recommend this book really highly. A History of Korea. Yep. Oh, and here on the front, this is funny. So this is from Japan. This actually depicts Portuguese. Those are Portuguese traders as part of this what's the word I'm looking for? Frick. Oh no, those aren't Portuguese. Those are supposed to be Korean. Those are Joseon. Sorry. They look, yeah, those are Joseon. Those are men of Joseon as represented by 17th century Japanese. That interesting. Okay. Then finally, this is a newer book. So oh goodness, I have no idea what just happened. I'm sorry. That's annoying. I have no idea where the screen went blank. Generals and Scholars. This is a book, Generals and Scholars, Military Rule in Medieval Korea. Really fascinating. So this focuses on just medieval Korea. And it talks about, especially focuses hard on Goryeo, the Goryeo dynasty, where the word Korea comes from. Yeah, it's not a big book. It's well written. It explains a lot of things. It goes into Buddhism. It explains how Confucianism eventually comes in and ruins everything, right? So this is a really excellent book if you want to understand medieval Korea, and especially the role that military rule played in it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So patrons and channel members. Also, I have a Discord for my patrons and channel members. Everyone, if you're a patron and a channel member and you didn't realize I have a Discord, drop me a note and I'll make sure you get the invitation again. I did post it 2 weeks ago, I think, but I'll post it again. Okay, everyone. Well, we are coming up on the 3-hour mark. So I'm going to thank you all for joining. Yeah, I know. I don't know what happened. It cut out. It's back again. I'm sorry, guys. I thank you all for joining me again today. If you'd like to be notified when I do other such live streams, make sure to hit the bell or the notifications in whatever platform you're on. I will be doing other random live streams as time and energy permit. So, you never know when I might pop up going live. Otherwise, there will be Medieval Book Corner story time with the Contessa this week. It will be Wednesday evening, your time, Thursday morning, my time, Wednesday evening, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. East Coast time, and then whatever that is in your respective time zones. Otherwise, if you asked a question and I didn't get to it, pop it in the comments under the video when it posts, because I'm not going to look back through 3 hours of live stream chat to fish questions out. But if you pop them under the comments, then I'll be able to see them and access them pretty quickly and easily. Otherwise, I really do thank you all for joining me. Thank you so much. It's been another wonderful day together. I appreciate your support. And I look forward to the next time we get to chat, everyone. Until then, may your adventures and explorations be creative.